Hearing of the Labor and Industry and Communications and Technology Committees to order. I thank all of the panelists who have agreed to participate in today's hearing. I have just a few reminders. Everyone will remain muted from the chamber until it is their turn to speak. Members will be unmuted when asking a question and will remain unmuted during the duration of the answer. We ask that all ambient noise be turned off, such as televisions in the background during this Zoom hearing. In an effort to get as many questions as possible, with the exception of the chairs, members are limited to one question at a time and will have as many rounds of questions as time allows. Members continue to contact committee staff to participate in each round. I think it is safe to say that the issue that senators are hearing about most from our constituents during this COVID-19 disaster emergency is unemployment compensation. My office has fielded hundreds of calls and emails from constituents trying to navigate the unemployment compensation system. Those calls and emails have become more and more desperate as the shutdown order has continued, and for some, benefits have not yet been paid. I've tried to stress patience from the onset. The system went from having approximately 40,000 new claims in the 3 weeks prior to the shutdown orders to more than 1.8 million claims and climbing in the 7 weeks since, continuing regular claims and pandemic unemployment assistance applications. The number of initial claims filed since March 15th is more than the number of initial claims the system had ever received in a calendar year. The high week of initial claims was more than 6 times the peak week for initial claims during the Great Recession. No one could have been prepared for the onslaught of claims that occurred, but now, 7 weeks from the start of the shutdown order, I know members of the Senate and citizens of the Commonwealth have many questions and frustrations about the administration of the unemployment compensation system. I'm hopeful that today's hearing provides for a productive dialogue about some of the challenges the department has faced in trying to keep up with an unprecedented volume of unemployment compensation claims, and lays out a path forward to improve and strengthen the system of all Pennsylvanians. We stand in the spotlight of history. I cannot emphasize enough the gravity of our responsibility as elected and appointed officials and others whose mission is to protect the health and welfare of Pennsylvanians, our economy, our education system, our entrepreneurs, our seniors, their investments. We are responsible for protecting lives and livelihoods. They're not mutually exclusive. I will offer further comments before introducing our first panel, but at this time, I would like to turn it over to Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill, Chair of the Communications and Technology Committee, to offer introductory remarks. Senator?
Good afternoon, and I would like to welcome everyone to this joint hearing of the Senate Communications and Technology Committee and the Senate Labor and Industry Committee. And I want to thank the chair of the Senate Labor and Industry Committee, Senator Bartolotta, for agreeing to hold this very important hearing with me, and I really want to thank everyone for their attendance here today. We are certainly living in unprecedented times, times that none of us could have ever anticipated. And on March 19th, the governor issued his closure of all non-life sustaining businesses, triggering a historic rise in the number of unemployment compensation cases in the Department of Labor and Industry. And according to the department, just this past Saturday, more than 1.8 million Pennsylvanians have lost their jobs since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. That's roughly 24.7% of our entire workforce. Not only did people find themselves out of work because they were forced out of work, but to top it all off, they saw delays in payment and significant communication glitches within the system. And many of these individuals could not get a response from the department and have instead turned to us, their legislators, for answers. As the chairwoman said, these are people's lives and their livelihoods. And if the governor is going to tell them that they cannot work, we need to be doing everything in our power to ensure that they can still receive the unemployment compensation that they so desperately need and deserve. from a system that they have paid into just to take care of them at a time like this. Let me be crystal clear. Everyone participating in today's public hearing is still collecting a paycheck. Whether it is the legislators on the committees, the members of the Department of Labor and Industry, or even the individuals on our second panel, we all still have a paycheck. And this hearing today, it's not about us. It's not about any of us who are fortunate enough to still have a paycheck. Yes, I've turned down the pension and the health care, but let me be abundantly clear. We need to prioritize the individuals who are at home watching this hearing, holding out hope that we can find solutions to this problem, that we can have answers to their questions so that they can finally receive their unemployment compensation. Think about those individuals. They are our neighbors, our friends, even our family members. 6 now going on 7 weeks without pay, 6 going on 7 weeks with no income, without a way to pay their bills or buy necessities at the store. Yes, our charitable organizations, they are working overtime. They're doing great things. And I saw a photo in the York Dispatch the other week by it was captured by John Pavancello. It was a former Kmart off of Exit 18, the Mount Rose Interchange in York County, now operating as a drive-through food bank. It looked more like a drive-in movie theater in July. Again, our neighbors, our friends, our family members, and I'd venture to guess that not one of them ever anticipated that they would be sitting in a Kmart parking lot waiting to get a ration of food put into their trunk. Since the shutdown, we have been working to provide clarity and to avoid confusion, to provide answers to those individuals all across Pennsylvania who watch their careers and their paychecks vanish in an instant. We're not here looking for answers for our own gain. These are our constituents. They need answers for their own survival. So I urge everyone participating today, imagine if it was you that was told mid-March that you were no longer to report to work, that you would no longer receive a paycheck. The latest estimates from the department were that 70% of claimants had their unemployment compensation benefits fulfilled. That leaves 30% without their benefits that they so rightfully deserve. That's 500,000 Pennsylvanians. What if we all were in that category? How frustrated would we be if the system let us down in our greatest time of need? Let's think about those Pennsylvanians. Every day I look at that photo of the drive-through food bank in York County, 6 weeks without income. These are people who we are fighting for. These are the people who we are seeking answers for. And I hope that by having this hearing today, we can find answers and solve the major problems so that our constituents will know that they are being heard and that we are doing everything that we can to fix this broken system. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator. We also have with us today the minority chairs of the committees, Senator Tina Tartaglione and Senator Tim Carney. Would each of you like to make an introductory comment before we get started? Senator Tartaglione?
Yes, I would, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Senator Tartaglione.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank Secretary Alexiak, Executive Deputy O'Brien, and Deputy Secretary Trusky, and the esteemed members of our second panel for joining us today. I know the entire staff of the Department of Labor and Industry has been working relentlessly to serve the Commonwealth during this crisis, despite the unprecedented challenges we face. I applaud the Secretary and his team for meeting with all 4 chairs of the committee on a weekly basis to ensure we are kept up to date on all impacts this global pandemic is having on our Commonwealth. This is my 26th year as a member of the Senate. In that time, I have never seen the Department of Labor and Industry function as well and as smoothly as it has during your tenure, Mr. Secretary. I've said it before the pandemic, and I continue to say it now. I'm sure the members of our committees will have ample opportunity today to hear and consider the full context of what has happened in the last 7 weeks. We will consider the full scale of the many tasks at hand that have been impacting the department through UC, the CARES Act, workers' comp, OVR, and many other responsibilities housed within the department, as well as the impacts the pandemic has had on businesses and workers throughout the state. Clearly, Pennsylvania has been hard by this pandemic. Indeed, many communities, especially in the southeast region of the state, are still seeing many cases of the virus as well as additional deaths. The UC system has never experienced the level of demand it is seeing now. It has never encountered such a tremendous burden, essentially overnight. Despite the deluge of new claims, I am sure the Secretary and his deputies will be among the first to say that every single Pennsylvanian who has lost a job or has had their hours reduced deserves a thorough and timely consideration of their claims. Likewise, it is our responsibility as legislators to provide the department with ample support and resources to meet the public's needs. That includes times like now and times when we need may not be so apparent. During today's hearing, I will be very interested to hear from all perspectives how the department is managing all of these new claims, not just traditional UC claims, but also the non-traditional filers who have become eligible for benefits under the CARES Act. I look forward to hearing all of our panelists and welcome the conversation about ways we can continue to improve Pennsylvania's UC system. I would also like to thank the Secretary and his team for providing training for all staff of all four caucuses of the legislature that help us to better serve our constituents and for participating in town hall discussions that help us inform the public about the services available to them during this trying time. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator Tartaglione. Senator Carney, would you like to make some opening remarks?
Yes. Thank you, Chairs Bartolotta, Phillips-Hill, and Tartaglione. And thanks to all who are here today to testify. We're at an unprecedented time in our Commonwealth's history, faced with a novel disease. While we continue to debate the state's mitigation efforts, there is no question the impact of this global pandemic has been felt in every industry and in every home. We have seen an unprecedented over 1.7 million unemployment claims in just 7 weeks. The only comparison to this number that we have is during the 2008 financial crisis. 2009, there were close to 1 million unemployment claims for the year. That's a million claims, but over 52 weeks. We've experienced over 1.7 million claims in just 7 weeks. Nevertheless, our Department of Labor and Industry has stepped up to the challenge. Pennsylvania has paid out more than $3.5 billion in unemployment benefits, and the department is working day and night to end the backlog. By itself, this surge is unprecedented and would overwhelm regular UC operations. But on top of that, L&I is facing this crisis after years of disinvestment from state and federal funds, particularly cuts made by our House and Senate, cuts that were forced over objections of the Democratic minority. Over the past several years, the department was forced to lay off 500 staff and close 3 out of 7 UC centers over the objections of many legislators. Had the state increased or even sustained regular funding to the department, the conversation today would be different. Miraculously, and despite these hurdles, L&I was able to roll out a whole new unemployment compensation system in a matter of weeks. Even yesterday, announcing that the PUA system will be moving past the application phase and will be fully functioning in the next week, will allow individuals to begin filing those claims. We continue to underinvest in the UC system. We can't approach technology as a panacea or a replacement for having departmental staff in place for crises like the one we are in. Technology needs to be regularly improved and updated, and that also requires regular funding. My staff and I have received hundreds of calls concerning unemployment over these past few weeks, and the department has regularly addressed our constituent issues. Not everybody has been taken care of yet, but we are confident that this is going to happen. And for that, and the continued efforts that the department continues to take, like additional shifts to get the PIN numbers out and additional staff added to help address these claims, I want to extend a thank you to the Secretary and his staff. I should also note on the other end of the spectrum that we have also received calls from workers who are scared to return to work because they feel their employers can't or won't protect them. This is obviously a very complex and often contradictory situation we find ourselves in. I look forward to hearing from the Secretary about all the steps and efforts the department has taken over these past few weeks to address concerns around the UC system and also about worker protections moving forward. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Carney. Finally, I'd like to allow Senator Bob Mensch, Chair of the Appropriations Public Safety Subcommittee, to offer some opening remarks from a financial perspective. Senator Mensch.
Thank you, and I want to thank very much the four committee chair people for allowing me to participate and to offer some comments. You know, the one thing that holds us all together, every one of us that's in this hearing today, is our constituents. And service to our constituents always needs to be utmost in our minds. I've been in government now for 14 years, and I come from the private sector of 35 years. In communications, by the way, and we'll talk about that perhaps in a little bit. But in the last 14 years, one of the impressions that I've formed is that government doesn't always realize that it exists for its constituents, but rather that it exists for itself. I'm not making any innuendos or suggestions to our behavior today in the pandemic. I'm just saying that over time, because I have a historical perspective to this, that we don't always take seriously enough the constituent. And I think that's an issue for us right now in terms of the attitude from the administration and people being able to earn a paycheck and be able to provide for themselves, and the red, yellow, green. But we had that hearing yesterday, so I won't go there today. But in communications, historically, about 2% of an operating budget is spent on telecommunications, and about 2% of a operating budget is spent on computer services. On a $35 billion budget such as we have, 2% would be $7 million. Yet with, and Secretary, this is not aimed at you, this is a historical perspective of the entire department over time. But since 2013, the legislature has allocated $308,500,000 to computer and telephone services for the department. So I hear some commentary just a bit ago that we've underinvested in the services for the department. I think we've made substantial investments, and that is the question. If we made the investments and the expectation was the spending would be in the areas of communications and computer system support tools for your employees, what have we gotten in return? What do we, the legislature, what do we, the constituents, get in return for that investment of $308 million? In technology, whether you're talking about telephone, computers, there's a phenomenon that every 6 months, technology doubles in its capability and it halves in price. Said another way, every 6 months, for every dollar invested, your investment increases fourfold. So I think the citizens of Pennsylvania should have a very high expectation for the services that would be delivered. Now, I realize the effects of communications engineering, and you could never have engineered for the pandemic. You never would have had enough computer terminals. You never would have had enough telephone devices. But with that said, I think we had an expectation that we would have adequate tools to start the race. On March 8th, I'm not sure that we were equipped well enough with the adequate investments into technology. And as I say, it's a historical issue. It's in LNI, it's throughout the government of Pennsylvania. So I would like to, as we continue this conversation today, I would like to look at a lot of these investments and understand better where we did invest, what didn't we invest in, what should we have done, what is the program for going forward? And that becomes key. What is the operational plan to build a scalable system, one that can accommodate a pandemic, God forbid, if we have another one? Where will we be? Are we going to be back in the same position? So I think we need to talk about the efficiency of our spending, the accountability of our spending, and what it left us lacking in operational results. So thank you very much. I look forward to the hearing.
Thank you, Senator Mensch. I would now like to introduce the first panel of testifiers, and they are all from the Department of Labor and Industry. Secretary Jerry Alexiak, Executive Deputy Secretary Bob O'Brien, and Deputy Secretary for Unemployment Compensation Programs Bill Trusky. I first want to thank all three of you for joining us today and for staying in regular communication with the labor and industry chairs throughout the governor's shutdown in response to COVID-19. We have had at least one call every week since the governor's shutdown order, and I appreciate the sharing of information that has occurred on all of those calls. I know we are all sharing the same goal of getting benefits as quickly as possible to those individuals that rightly qualify, whether through the traditional unemployment compensation system or the federal programs established as part of the CARES Act. I want to acknowledge the work that the department is doing by getting payments out, as evidenced by the billions of dollars that have already been paid. The additional staff that is being brought on, the extra hours that many are working to process claims and mail, and to respond to constituent and legislative inquiries. But despite those efforts, there have certainly been some challenges as well. Individuals that applied in mid-March and at the onset of the governor's shutdown order that still do not have resolution on their initial claim, a rollout of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, the PUA, fraught with system issues and insufficient communication and guidance to applicants. The Friday night that PUA system rolled out, the following Sunday morning, I called my friend Jerry Alexiak, and we had a conversation about the rollout, and my frustration mirrored many of my constituents who, if they had just been warned at the onset that it was really just a placeholder and that the department was doing everything it possibly could to at least start the ball rolling, I think with a little more transparency and clarity, I think it would have alleviated a lot of frustration, and we shared that, and I appreciated the comments made by the Secretary. A wait for federal extended benefits for individuals that have exhausted regular unemployment claims that continues to go to this day is one more issue. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on how the unemployment system has functioned over the last several weeks, and I would like to invite you to please proceed with your testimony, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairwoman Bartolotta, Chairwoman Tartaglione, Chairwoman Phillips-Hill, and Chairman Carney, and the members of the Labor and Industry Committee and the Communications and Technology Committee. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today about the Department of Labor and Industry's unwavering efforts to provide critical unemployment benefits to vulnerable Pennsylvanians during this global pandemic. It's difficult to believe that 2 months have passed since Governor Tom Wolf signed the COVID-19 disaster declaration on March 6, 2020. Since the beginning of this crisis, Pennsylvania has recorded over 50,000 confirmed cases and almost 2,500 deaths related to COVID-19. However, because of the important steps this administration took to protect the lives of Pennsylvanians and the tremendous actions of so many to follow the quarantine guidelines from the CDC and the Department of Health, we have started to see the collective impact of our individual efforts in flattening the curve and stabilizing the number of new COVID-19 cases statewide. In fact, as you all know, on May 1st, the governor announced the reopening of 24 counties in the northwest and north central regions of the state, going from red to yellow effective this Friday, May 8th. This reflects this administration's careful calculus of weighing economic benefits with public health risks during this crisis. Unquestionably, this pandemic has caused extraordinary economic repercussions in our communities. Many of you have friends, family, colleagues, and constituents who now face unemployment or reduced wages since the beginning of this pandemic. I have family members who have been impacted medically, financially, emotionally as well. We have all heard stories of lost jobs from people we know. And when they're framed against the raw data, it profoundly reveals the staggering magnitude of the crisis. Some of these numbers you've heard, but I want to reemphasize. Since March 15th, L&I's Office of Unemployment Compensation Services, Service Centers, has received over 1.7, almost 1.8 million initial unemployment compensation claims, in addition to over 150,000 claims filed for pandemic unemployment assistance under the Federal CARES Act. Combined, that's nearly 1.9 million UC and PUA claims filed in a period of about 7 weeks. We hear the word unprecedented used in the media often these days, and it's easy to become desensitized to what that word means. So allow me to offer some perspective on the truly unprecedented volume of UC and PUA claims this agency has the Herculean task of processing. In the past 20 years, 2009 was the highest year for total new unemployment claims, as Senator Carney mentioned, with just over 960,000. That's just under 1 million claims in 52 weeks. To date, L&I has reached over 1.7 million new claims in just 7 weeks. I think that number deserves repeating. In the past 20 years, 2009 was the highest year for total new unemployment claims with just over 960,000. That's just under 1 million claims in 52 weeks. To date, L&I has received 1.7 million new claims in just 7 weeks. At the height of the Great Recession, the unemployment rate reached a high of 8.7% in 2010. Before this global pandemic, Pennsylvania experienced record low unemployment, thanks to Governor Wolf's sustained efforts to create good-paying jobs in the Commonwealth. However, if Pennsylvania's economic trajectory follows the rest of the nation's due to this global pandemic, we could be on track to experience going from record low unemployment to record highs, eclipsing the current unemployment rate by more than double digits this past year. Since the beginning of the pandemic, Pennsylvania has been consistently ranked among the top 10 states in the nation for the volume of total UC claims, including UC claims as a share of the state's labor force. For example, as of April, there were over 250 jobs lost in Pennsylvania due to COVID-19 for every 1,000 workers in the state labor force. Simply put, in 7 short weeks, we've experienced a 180-degree whiplash on almost every single important economic benchmark. This global pandemic, by all accounts, has caused one of the worst employment crises in U.S. history, and the staff at L&I are on the forefront of addressing those unparalleled challenges. At the beginning of 2020, Pennsylvania experienced low unemployment, and we had the resources necessary to address a lower volume of unemployment claims. However, life as we knew it would drastically change at the hands of the global pandemic, and the low unemployment levels for which we were staffed and funded became a thing of the past, seemingly overnight. Our staffing numbers put this dramatic shift into perspective. At the end of the Rendell administration in 2011, we went from 1,410 UC Service Centers staff members to 977 at the start of the Wolf administration in 2015, which was subsequently adjusted to 679 before the pandemic. Let me put it this way. At the height of the Great Recession, we had nearly 1,500 UC Service Center staff members on hand to respond to that crisis. Right before this pandemic, we had just 679 staff in the UC Service Center. As of today, we have 1 UC staff person for about every 2,500 UC claims we've received since March 15th. Many of you and your staff have learned and now understand through the UC trainings we have provided to all 4 caucuses the complexity that underlies the correct processing for each claim. To be compliant with federal regulations, many of these claims require manual assistance by unemployment compensation staff. There is no getting around this labor-intensive process, which we are now doing at historic numbers with fewer staff working in extraordinary circumstances. But again, I want to give kudos to our staff. We've addressed the challenge head on. In 7 short weeks, we have adapted and evolved more quickly than at any point in our agency's 100-year-plus history. Despite all the uncertainty of the world and experiencing pressures on all fronts, UC and other Commonwealth staff have stepped up to provide benefits to Pennsylvanians that depend on us the most. The results of our hard work are bearing fruit, and UC staff have achieved significant milestones that I'm proud to share. In 2 weeks, we transformed UC operations into a nearly entirely work-from-home environment with over 700 staff members in the offices of UC service centers and UC benefits policy. We test new IT enhancements, write policy, answer calls, process claims, open mail, and distribute work, and create new processes and standards for supporting frontline staff. Since March 15th, we have issued nearly 9 million payments, totaling about $3.9 billion, and I think we passed the $4 billion mark today, for new and existing UC claims, and have issued more than $1.4 billion in the additional $600 weekly payments through the Federal CARES Act. We know that 70% of new and eligible claimants who opened claims from March 15th through April 4th and have filed their biweekly claims have received a payment, and we are ramping up payments to claimants who have filed after April 4th as well. We have launched a brand new system for independent contractors, self-employed, and gig workers to efficiently administer the PUA benefits, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance benefits, to ensure compliance with new federal regulations and to expand our processing capacity. We have made that application available in just 2 weeks. The system is being improved as we speak. It has enhanced functionality and visibility for claimants and has received about 150,000 new claims so far. But we know at L&I that this isn't enough. So we are doubling our capacity to answer phones on Mondays and Tuesdays, which are typically the busiest days for the UC service centers. We are expanding our telephone hours from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. daily. And while the telephone hours may end at 4 p.m., our work does not. Our UC staff have worked about 47,000 hours of overtime since March 15th, including weekends, late evenings, and even on Easter Sunday. Many staff members are working 7 days a week, responding to claimant emails, addressing inquiries from various legislative offices, manually pushing claims through, and working with IT to fix the inevitable glitches in the development and launch of the new PUA system. We are considering all options and have been from the beginning, including expanding call center hours. Many of you have asked about how exactly we have bolstered staffing levels within the UC service centers, and I'd like to share some numbers there. We have tapped 70 experienced UC retirees to return to work. We have reassigned 500 staff from within L&I and from other agencies to help the UC service centers. We will soon bring on board 120 more new hires, our triple I's, our intake interviewers, to support the program, and we have plans to hire 125 more by the end of the month. We are training additional Commonwealth PA Career Link staff to support UC customers when filing new claims and problem solving their UC challenges. We launched an automated virtual phone assistant, which has answered nearly 120,000 questions so far. We have quadrupled the number of phone calls answered each week, quadrupled the number since mid-March. L&I staff understand the vital role that they play in stabilizing Pennsylvania's economy. I have said from the day I walked into that office that as important as it is for us to file the paperwork and make sure the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, and follow the regulations of the federal government and all the things that we need to do. But we have to remember, and we do remember, that there are real people at the end of the process. Our friends, our neighbors, our relatives, who are looking for relief. And our staff are regularly going beyond the call of duty to evolve, to find efficiencies, and to improve their operations. As L&I Secretary, I am incredibly proud of what they have accomplished in such a short period, with poise, humility, compassion, and grit. Moreover, we are doing our absolute best to conduct outreach to stakeholders during this pandemic so that they can receive and share critical information for their communities and constituents. In addition to the over 8,000 constituent inquiries we've responded to through our Office of Legislative Affairs, you heard, as Senator Bartolotta mentioned, we have weekly, sometimes twice weekly meetings with the 4 caucus chairs of the House and Senate Labor and Industry Committees. Working with senior unemployment compensation staff, I and members of my team have participated so far in 16 teletown halls, including with some of you on the call today, with federal and state legislators of both parties. And then we have reached audiences numbering between 1,200 to 7,500 to address questions from their constituents. I have participated in calls organized by local chambers of commerce, the state NAACP, the Philadelphia City Council, the Pittsburgh Black Elected Officials Coalition, and many others. I have yet to reject a single invitation from a legislator that I've been able to get to. And when I haven't, we've had members of our staff available. To date, we have reached over 35,000 Pennsylvanians as a result of this proactive outreach. We've also, as you heard, facilitated 4 separate trainings for each of the caucuses of the House and Senate, which have been very well attended and very well received, to enhance your understanding of UC and to help address constituent concerns. Our Office of Communications has responded to a record number of press inquiries. We've conducted several live interviews with radio and television news stations. We hold weekly media calls that regularly have between 45 and 50 reporters in attendance. Our UC staff have responded to over 200,000 emails from claimants. This is since March 15th. We've developed many resources on our website with guidance, instructions, frequently asked questions, and tips to assist UC customers. We update these resources every day as new information is available. We are doing all of this while simultaneously performing work behind the scenes to implement new IT systems, troubleshoot problems, and ensure claimants are paid as quickly as possible. We weigh carefully each day the decision to divert UC staff to conduct outreach because we know the importance of getting the messages out to anxious claimants. But we also recognize that we have a duty to get those benefits out the door. And we're doing all this, I might add, in addition to the routine work that labor and industry does with our Office of Vocational Rehabilitation, in our Workers' Comp office, in our Safety and Labor Management office. We are doing not just the routine work, but we are working with other agencies to address this global pandemic. We thank you for your support during this time of crisis. We understand that you and your staff are also on the receiving end of frustrated calls and emails from constituents. We appreciate what you've done. Your speedy efforts to pass Act 9, which allowed us to implement federal legislation and gave us the authority to temporarily waive certain UC requirements for both workers and employers. We are grateful for your efforts to make our jobs easier by working to get important messages out to claimants and streamline processes with our Office of Legislative Affairs. There is no easy, comfortable way to deal with a global pandemic. As you know, many businesses and organizations are dealing with a supply and demand problem. Long waits are not specific to unemployment. Furthermore, there is not one single state that has been spared from the economic fallout caused by COVID-19. Pennsylvania is rising to the occasion thanks to the tireless efforts of our public servants, particularly those at Labor and Industry. We have a proud history at L&I of meeting our mandate when the odds have been stacked against us. Some of you may know that responsibility for UC was delegated to us in 1936 at the height of the Great Depression, after Congress enacted the seminal Social Security Act in 1935. Our predecessors during that time faced a daunting, challenging situation of addressing the worst economic calamity of their lifetimes, and they responded. At that time, the weekly UC benefit ranged from $7.50 to $15, depending on the worker's wage. From having no unemployed employees handling UC in 1936, the number rose to over 4,000 by the beginning of 1938. L&I paid out the first unemployment benefits in 1938 with checks for 2 Pennsylvanians who were laid off: George Gruber, a steel worker who lost his job as a riveter at Bethlehem Steel, and Ruth Rupp, a sewing machine operator from Middletown. George, Ruth, and countless other Pennsylvanians who have earned and collected unemployment benefits over the past 80+ years were able to provide for their families and sustain a living because of these benefits. We know that there are real people at the end of the process, people that we at L&I are privileged to serve. This extraordinary situation is requiring us to apply everything we have in our power: people, resources, and sheer determination to successfully navigate the road before us. Despite this moment of uncertainty and anxiety, L&I employees have stepped up. I've had the honor of bearing witness to their extraordinary actions, each doing their part to ensure the needs of Pennsylvanians are being met, and each supporting colleagues doing the same. They are performing important, vital, foundational work so that Pennsylvanians can live, eat, pay their bills, and feel more secure about their future. Many things seem daunting now. I know that the future of this agency and this Commonwealth is bright, thanks in a large part to their tireless efforts, the efforts of my colleagues in the Wolf administration, the efforts of you on this call and your legislative colleagues, and the efforts of our fellow Pennsylvanians. I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve as the Secretary during this crisis, and I will continue to be deeply appreciative of the continued efforts of the outstanding staff in our agency. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Deputy Secretary O'Brien, Deputy Secretary Trusky, and I will be happy to take your questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And in the interest of time, if we have the other 2 panelists that would like to make some comments, please feel free to do so, but summarize your key points if you would, and we'll get on with questions. So Executive Deputy Secretary Bob O'Brien or Deputy Secretary Bill Trusky, would either of you like to make a comment at this time?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We're ready for questions.
Thank you very much. I first want to thank all 3 of you for joining us again, and for staying in regular contact as well. Just want to make sure that we get all of our questions addressed by all of those that are in both committees. I have a quick question that I'd like to pose to whomever would like to speak. What is the status of implementation of the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program, the PUA? I just had a phone call yesterday with a constituent who was in dire straits. He invested all he had into a business that actually he runs out of his home in my hometown of Monongahela. It's become an international business. Anyone going to a Panera Bread or others like that with a sticker that's removable, that's his product. But because restaurants are closed, he has no way of getting any kind of revenue from his business, and he is desperate for the PUA portal to work. He's basically going to lose his entire business, and I told him he was one of millions. So I would like to ask that question of you. What is the status of the implementation of the PUA assistance program? And throw it in there, once applications are processed, how long will it take for individuals to receive those benefits?
Thank you, Senator. I'll begin, and then Deputy Trusky, if you have anything, or Bob, if you have anything you want to add. We were able to get the initial part of the system online April 18th, actually very late in the evening of April 17th. And we began a soft opening on the 18th. We knew that we still had work to do, but we wanted to get as many people as possible into the line, into the queue, so that we could get benefits distributed when we were able to. It took a little bit of time to get that system going because we had to wait for federal guidelines. We had to keep those dollars independent of our regular UC dollars. Some of those guidelines changed as we were creating that system, but we did get it going April 18th. And to this date, we've accepted 150,000 applications. Again, there were some glitches, as you know, Senator. You referred to the phone call you and I had, and I always appreciate you reaching out. We knew there would be some glitches, but we wanted to get those folks in line. We are well on the way to getting that system operational. Our goal is by the end of this week. And once it is operational, then people will be able to file for their initial weekly claim. And within a few days of that filing, those dollars will get out the door. So, Bill, do you have anything you want to add to that?
I know on Friday we sent a number of files to Treasury, so we're in position to start paying people as soon as we have the back end of the system up. As the Secretary said, that should be within days, Senator.
Thank you. Quick follow-ups. If applications are denied, how will individuals be notified, and will the potential exists for applicants to correct that application if the entering of incorrect information is the reason for the denial? Can they find that out quickly, correct that, and assist in moving forward with their funds?
Yes, Senator. They, this is an online portal. They'll be able to log in, see the status of their PUA claim, and they will be able to update their information.
Great. And lastly, and then I'll pass it along to Senator Phillips-Hill. If individuals are required to apply for regular benefits first, how quickly will their claims be processed so that if they're ineligible, they can then proceed to the PUA application? Because they do have to be denied first, apparently, and then be notified and move forward with the PUA application. How quick is that process at the moment?
Senator, that's something we'll need to work on with staff and prioritize those denials. You are correct. The federal guidelines say that regular unemployment takes precedent, and we need a denial to move them forward. So we will work with staff to make sure those denial letters get out to folks quickly as possible. We'll also look at emailing those folks if that's a quicker method to get in touch with them.
Thank you very much. Next, our next questions will be coming from Senator Tartaglione. Senator Tartaglione.
Madam Chair, I'd first like to make a comment. I had looked at the agenda. I didn't realize someone from the Appropriations Subcommittee was testifying. I think it's unfortunate that the Democrats didn't have someone as well to testify. Mr. Secretary, we all know that the computer network for traditional UC claims is more than 40 years old. In 2016, the department selected IBM to update the unemployment compensation mainframe, which was supposed to be completed in 2010. As we are all well aware, and maybe not everybody is well aware because they haven't been in the Senate as long as IBM failed to meet the mark, and after numerous extensions and astronomical additional costs, the contract was allowed to lapse in 2013. A new RFP was put out and GSI was awarded the new contract, and a lawsuit was filed against IBM. Can you update us on the status of the new system and when it is supposed to go online?
Certainly, Senator. You're correct in what you're saying, that there were some issues with IBM. There's a lawsuit going on right now, so we can't really comment on that. But after that happened, a new RFP was put out. GSI, following the procedures, was awarded that bid, Initially, they had hoped to be done sooner than October of 2020, but once they got in and saw the real extent of what was involved, we worked with the vendor, and we arrived at a date of October of 2020. And even with the issues facing us with the pandemic, we are well on the way to having that system functional in October of this year. Our relationship with GSI was very helpful. They were the ones who helped us create the system we needed for the HUA application. So we have had great success with GSI. We've been in regular contact with the legislature about that from the very beginning. We let the legislators know that we were not going to make the initial April 19 deadline, that was extended to October of 2020. And part of what was involved in that was the creation of the BenMod Advisory Committee, which each caucus has a representative that's a part of that. And we have provided regular updates to the House and Senate through the Benefits BenMod Advisory Committee. We provide regular updates to the administration. We have seen demonstrations of what the system is going to look like. And we're very happy with the product that we have received thus far. And we are fully expecting to go in October of 2020. And Bill and Bob, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
Taglio. Hello?
Yes, you're good.
Thank you. I just want to point out, Senator Tartaglione, and to everybody else on both committees, that BenMod is on budget as we speak.
My next question, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Go ahead.
Act 34, a little bit more history. Act 34 of 2013 created the Service and Infrastructure Improvement Fund, or SIF, to improve the UC service system, which was struggling to assist claimants with long call waits, frequent busy signals, and drop calls that were caused by federal funding being reduced from $175 million in 2012 to $132 million in 2016. Funds were allocated from the UC Trust Fund to SIF for years 2013 through 2016. This funding allowed for significant improvement. However, the SIF expired at the end of 2016, forcing roughly the layoff of 500 employees and the closing of 3 of 7 call centers. Can you tell me what the impact would have been if we had not lost those employees?
I'm going to ask Bob or Bill, who were, Bob especially was around then.
Well, simple math, if we would have had those 2 call centers that we had to close, the one in Lancaster, the one in Allentown, if we were able to keep them open and keep the employees there, we would have had a significant amount of employees who could answer phones, work on unemployment compensation cases. When we received bridge funding in April of 2017, then when Act 60 was passed, we staffed up, working with Deputy Trusky, we staffed up to the maximum amount of people that we could afford under that legislation. Needless to say, Senator Tartaglione, to answer your question, if we would have had 2 additional call centers up and running, service would have been significantly better.
Thank you. And one last question for this round. With over 1.7 million new traditional unemployment claims filed since March 15th, can you please tell me, Mr. Secretary, does Pennsylvania's experience, how Pennsylvania's experience compares to other states in terms of the number of claims you have received, the number of claims you have approved, the number of claims that have been paid, and the time it's taking to process the claims? And are we doing better or worse than other states across the nation in this crisis?
Thank you, Senator. I can't give you very specific data right now, but what I can tell you what I'm hearing, and I'll ask Secretary Trusky to speak that out as well, Deputy Secretary Trusky. We are doing pretty well given the age of our system. I know some states, Maryland has had terrible problems. They have an older system and they actually had to shut down taking calls at one point. Other states that thought they were ready to make payments were not. So we have not been number one in the nation as far as getting this done, but we certainly have done better than many states in responding to the situation that we're in, particularly when it comes to the PUA. Bill, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, Secretary. I think it's dangerous to compare states to one another. It's not apples to apples across the 50 states and the 3 territories that administrate UI programs. However, we have been recognized by a national economist as paying claims very quickly. So again, to our staff, as the Secretary mentioned, they haven't flinched once. They've taken on these challenges, continue to push out claims and pay people benefits.
Madam Chair, I'll ask questions if there's time during the next round.
Certainly, Senator, thank you. Next question is from Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill.
I don't think the mic, there we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary Alexiak, Deputy Secretary O'Brien, and Deputy Secretary Trusky, thank you for being here today. And those numbers or lack of numbers or the things that you said in answer to the gentlelady from Philadelphia's questions, I think provide very little solace to the 500,000 people who have yet to receive their unemployment compensation check. But I do want to say this to you. I truly appreciate all of the hard work that the people who are responding to claims have put in the department. They are working around the clock, and their efforts are appreciated. Which leads me to the question of how much lead time was the department provided in advance of Governor Wolf's mandated closure on March 19th?
I can tell you that at our January cabinet meeting is the first that I remember. There may have been something in December, but I don't remember specifically. What I know at our January monthly cabinet meetings, at our January cabinet meeting, this was discussed, particularly Secretary Levine gave an update on it. We started talking about where this would go. We had more updates at our February meeting. We had an exercise at PEMA looking at what may be involved in this. As this was getting closer, we began internally to look at what do we need to do. And the charge I gave, we started a COVID-19 work group, a small work group in the agency. And the charge was, if we got a call today that the Capitol complex is closing tomorrow, would we be ready? And we began looking into what it would take to get our folks set up at home. We soon expanded that group to include all of our deputy secretaries and other members of our leadership team. We were talking daily about what we had to do. And when the time came that the Capitol complex was being closed, I think were as ready as any agency that I know of that could respond. So we got.
Was there any anticipation that nearly 1.7, now your department came out with 1.8 million people would be out of a job and thus thrown into your unemployment compensation system in January, in February, in March? And if so, what type of preparation did you make? Because this was truly a sweeping impact on the unemployment compensation system, as well as on the businesses that were mandated closed by the governor.
Right, and I want to be careful in equating the 1.8 million to people out of work. We don't know yet how many people are out of work, and we'd have to really get into the weeds talking about the claims as to why that isn't a one-on-one correlation. What I was telling you is what we were doing. We were looking at what could we do. Were we anticipating 1.7 million new claims or 1 million in 3 weeks? Absolutely not. I don't know anyone, anywhere across the state or across the country that would have been ready for that. I think we were as prepared as we could possibly be, given some of the numbers that you've heard about staffing and federal dollars. Our federal allotment, $124 million in 2016, 109 in 2020. It's gone down consistently because of the unemployment that we had, and we were staffed to deal with that. When we knew more was coming, we worked with HR, our Human Resources Department, to hire more intake interviewers. We began working with IT. What can we do to upgrade our system? All those things that I mentioned are how we responded, and we continue to respond. It wasn't like the governor closed the Commonwealth and we all of a sudden said, what do we do now?
So there was no attempt at the department to quantify the number of people that potentially could be unemployed based on closures of sectors of industry?
I don't know if Bill can answer that, but I can tell you what our primary concern was. Our primary concern was getting our system and our employees up and ready to respond when people were seeking unemployment compensation benefits. I would love to have the opportunity when this is done to look back and see what we can learn from this. But at the time, our focus was what can we do to respond to the unprecedented needs that we saw once this started, and it grew and grew and grew, that we knew we were going to face.
Well, and I will say that I completely agree with you. When this is all said and done, there's going to have to be a lot of reflection because certainly I think there will be great opportunities to do things better. God forbid we ever face this type of crisis again.
I completely agree, Senator.
We talked about the fact that many individuals are now seeking unemployment compensation through the PUA. How many of the claims are from those individuals who are self-employed that you have processed?
I don't know that number. I don't know if Deputy Trusky, if you have that number.
No, Secretary.
Do you
I
know
don't-
how
we have-
many PUA applications that you have received in total?
We have processed 150,000. I know some of those people that, as Deputy Secretary Trusky mentioned, the federal regulations require that traditional UC is the option of first choice. So when people applied, as they were, if it indicated that they had received W-2 wages or they were eligible for traditional workers' comp, they were kicked into that system. Some of that was a glitch that we were able to fix within a few days. But I don't know, Bill, again, if you have any further detail.
No, we haven't drilled down, Senator, as far as to see what segments of the population in PUA have applied. We're focused on getting the back end of the system up and running and getting payments out the door as quickly as possible.
Right.
And so to Helen, who cuts my hair, and Angie, who owns the salon where I get my hair cut, and to all those self-employed independent contractors, when can we tell them that they're going to receive a check in the mail?
Senator, I would add my son-in-law to that list, who is a chef who works part-time, no longer cooking, but he is now teaching safety courses, the Safe Serve courses to
And when can
restaurants.
he expect to receive a check?
Same time as your hairdressing. We are hoping to get those checks out the door sometime next week, as long as the technology cooperates, and thus far it has. Bill, I don't know if you want to add any more to that.
So
No, we-
one last
we can-
question for you, Mr. Secretary, and that is that Act 60 of 2012, I had a front row seat. I was actually staff member for the previous chair of the House Labor and Industry Committee. And my understanding was that after 8 years in the Rendell administration, the Unemployment Compensation Fund was $3 billion in debt to the federal government. Through a lot of negotiation, labor, business, House, Senate, governor, Democrats and Republicans, that debt was privately financed, saving taxpayers $60 million. We finally came through those increased payments, and the fund was 181% capitalized going into this crisis. Where can we get the numbers on the funding, how it stands, how the Unemployment Compensation Fund is holding up, and what we can expect in terms of financial projections going forward?
Right, we check that fund regularly. We know we are already in consultation, and to finish the 180%, we were well on the way to being fully solvent. That's the UC Trust Fund sometime this summer, which would have been a 250% funding. That would be considered fully solvent. We are in, it is taking a hit, obviously, with the tremendous numbers that we are facing. We follow that every day. We are in consultation with the United States Department of Labor. We know that part of the Federal CARES Act will allow us to borrow interest-free from the federal government if we need to replenish that fund. And again, I'll ask Bill to fill in any details I missed.
Senator, we continue to update the chairs of the Labor Committee and their staffs regularly on the fund balance. The U.S. Treasury only updates it bi-monthly. As of 4/16, we had approximately 2.6 billion in the fund. We just came out of the first tax quarter of this year, and fortunately, our receivables weren't much less than last year's first quarter. So you have to commend the employer community for doing their part to keeping the fund afloat, because our collections weren't down much from last year. So we will continue to update the 4 labor chairs and staff as we get updates to the fund.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator. Thank you, Senator. Before I move on to Senator Carney, I just wanted to answer Chair Tartagliano's comment about Senator Mensch. Not only is he a member of the Labor and Industry Committee, but he is also the chair of Appropriations Public Safety Subcommittee, and was just asked to add a few comments from the financial perspective. It wasn't truly testimony, it's just some comments about the financial perspective. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. Senator Carney, you have questions.
Thank you, Chairwoman. We're obviously all concerned about the people who are kind of involved in the system but still haven't gotten their checks. That's something we can all agree on. And I know it's something that you guys are working very hard on. One question that keeps coming up with my constituents is the idea of the PIN, and why the kind of PIN needs to be mailed to them. Why can't we do something more electronic with that?
Can I ask Bill and Bob to speak to that?
It's similar, Senator, to a bank where they send you the PIN through the mail. It's all about security. We feel mailing the PIN is a more secure way of doing business. The new system, the PUA system, will not have a PIN. Again, it's more self-service based. It will be similar to our BenMod system when we roll that out in October. So unfortunately, the system we're using requires the PIN, and it's for security purposes.
So basically what that's saying is that this kind of older system that you're sort of stuck with moving forward, as opposed to something that if we had actually funded the programs the way we should have over the years, we'd be past that point at this point.
Well, unfortunately, we've never faced this number of claims, and prior to this, the system worked. We were able to get PINs out the door quickly. So yeah, I think, we never unfortunately faced this. So changing that process in the mainframe in the list of priorities wasn't close to the top, because there weren't complaints prior to this.
I agree with my colleagues in that, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And that's kind of what we're facing on about that. I think that's all, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Tartaglione, did you have a question? Or do you want to wait for the next round for a comment?
I'll wait for the next round.
Okay, thank you, Senator. Our next question comes from Senator DeSanto.
Thank you, Secretary Alexia. As you know, I was someone from the outset who had deep concerns about the dysfunction and mismanagement of the department, and I opposed your nomination in 2017 because I did not believe your resume had the technical and operations experience to hold agency management accountable for results and improved service quality for taxpayers. I was one of the few votes against Act 60 of 2017 because I believe the legislature should have only authorized shorter-term funding and continued to press for answers since the department had botched a $180 million unemployment compensation computer system upgrade. I said at that time that taxpayers, employers, and the unemployed deserved an efficiently run and effectively administered unemployment compensation system. Upon your renomination as Secretary in 2019, I heard you tell this committee under oath that you had taken steps to expedite claims, increase availability of service centers to receive calls, and implement technological changes to enhance customer experience, and that you had built the best possible management team. Your written testimony said the benefits modernization project was actively underway and would transform the way that applications for benefits are filed and processed in Pennsylvania and transition our program from an aging, paper-based system to one that is nimbler and more responsive to our customers' needs. Today, I must express my outrage at the department's continued inability to process the benefits rightly owed to hundreds of frustrated constituents calling my office as a direct result of this state's actions shutting down their employment. As my constituents plead for assistance, all my staff and I can do is complete a legislative contact form that we now know the department may never respond to and encourage them to hold on to for just a few more weeks because of the guidance that you are providing. I know no one expected we would have 1.7 million unemployed Pennsylvanians, but after this legislature voted 2.5 years ago to give your department an extra $115 million on top of the hundreds of millions that we have previously supposed to go to system and service upgrades, and after we've been told all this time that changes have been implemented, and I am left wondering what the hell is wrong here. I went back and looked at the governor's budget address from February and the actual budget he proposed, and I couldn't find one reference to needing more resources to make sure the UC system works. I can understand the new pandemic unemployment assistance program from the federal government would take a little time to implement, but the traditional unemployment compensation system should not have been fraught with chaos given all the rosy updates. I believe this department, with you at the helm, has squandered a historic period of low unemployment to make the fundamental systematic changes needed. And once again, like so many times before, Pennsylvanians have been disserviced by a government bureaucracy that rewards political favoritism over competence and merit. Can you please tell this committee where the key failures have been this past 2.5 years? Who will be held accountable and in what way so that at least the unemployed Pennsylvanians still waiting for a payment can know their current suffering will lead to a better functioning department in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. But I understand that you opposed this isn't about me personally, but I need to say something. Yes, you opposed my nomination the first time around. I was unanimously, I don't know if you were part of that unanimous vote or not, but I was unanimously approved the second time I stood before the Senate, and I'm very proud of that. I stand behind every single word I said under oath about what we were doing with the system. I stand behind every word I said under oath and in updates to the Benefits Modernization Advisory Committee, in budget hearings, and in independent hearings related to UC. I stand behind everything I said about what we were doing to the system, the current system that is over 40 years old, and the progress we were making on BenMod. We are ready to go with BenMod in October of this year. And to answer one of your questions, Senator, I will be held accountable. And I look forward to being held accountable by my employer and by the people of this Commonwealth. So I'm not going to back down on anything I have said or done, anything this agency has said or done, and we are fully ready to do what we need to do to meet the needs of our citizens. Am I frustrated? Yes, I am frustrated. I told you, I have family members who are waiting. I have relatives that are. I get it. We get it. I care about the citizens of this Commonwealth. We are doing everything we can to meet their needs, and we will continue to do that. I don't know what else to tell you, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I find that fully inadequate because I'm beyond frustrated with the Department of Labor and Industry, not the employees that are trying to diligently work under an outdated system and poor leadership that is inexcusable. Thank you.
I would be happy to meet with you and your staff independently to discuss my inadequacies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary.
You're welcome.
Senator Lindsey Williams, please. You have questions.
Thank you. Secretary Alexiak, thank you very much first for your work, for your staff's work. My office, like every other legislative office, has received countless calls on unemployment. Your staff has been responsive and helpful. It's clear that they and you, as their leader, care very deeply about getting people the benefits that they deserve as quick as possible. And you know what? You and those staff cared about those workers when there was historic low unemployment. They just didn't care now. They have cared for a very long time. Also, I know that this hearing is on unemployment, but your office is working on many, many more things. During today's Workforce Development Board meeting, you gave a very comprehensive update on what you've been working on, such as processing 1,900 COVID-related workers' compensation claims, including 1,300 claims for our first responders who need those workers' compensation benefits. And you're working with the federal government on a national dislocated worker grant so that we can make sure that workers who don't have a job to go back to have the retraining, and so we can get them back to work. But, you know, despite all the work that you've done and your staff has done, you pointed out in your testimony that 30% of those workers still haven't received a check. My mom is one of those 30%, having filed her claim on March 19th. I have many constituents in the same boat. You know, there was some glitch, even though she had a PIN and has filed for unemployment before. There was a transaction error in her Social Security number on the back end. And so I'd like you to talk a little bit about what those workers should do if they're in that situation. And prior to the pandemic, you know, these workers, this is very labor intensive process. So what does your staff have to do? How long did it normally take to fix an error like that? And has that time frame changed now during this unexpected crisis? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your comments, Senator Williams, about our staff. I appreciate that, and they do as well. The 30% that we're still working on, and I'm going to ask Bill to jump in here as well, most of those claims are related to issues, individual issues with those particular claims. As you mentioned, the Social Security number issue with your moms. Anytime there are issues like that, those claims get kicked out of the system and have to be manually reviewed. They have to be looked at individually by our UC staff. And sometimes they can fix those questions. Sometimes they have to reach out to the applicant to have those fixed. Sometimes it requires, if it's depending on the extremity of it, they may be denied, and then it goes through the appeal process. So there are many, many reasons why those claims may not have been filed yet. It's a numbers thing, just like all this is. Yes, there are some delays, more than we would anticipate normally. We are doing as much as we can. That's why we are bringing on all these extra people, and they need to be trained because it is a complicated system. Bill, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, just Senator, you know, we were able to make those corrections within days prior to this. Unfortunately, you know, it's taking longer than that, weeks, 2 weeks. And we're trying to put certain claims in buckets. You know, everybody says about the 70%, and we talk about the people that haven't been paid. There's a number of people in that bucket that aren't eligible. So we just continue to work as hard as we can. We know the claims that have problems, and our staff just continues to go through them one by one. So again, thank you for the support of our staff. It's appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Is that your only question, Senator Williams? Okay, thank you, Senator. Our next questioner is Senator Pastafano.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Secretary. This is, with all these claims that we have, I know the best way to reduce your claim load is to make sure we get our people back to work. That's something I know we're all trying to do right now. But my question is more about the federal component, the $600 weekly Federal CARES Act benefit. I know that's caused some companies that reopen, especially those who received the payroll protection program loan. They have some of their furloughed employees that are refusing to return back to work. Now, this was amplified by the governor during a press conference, saying that they could refuse to return to work and still keep their benefits. Now, according to the federal government, that's considered fraud. With the large claimant load that you have, how swiftly does your department suspend your unemployment benefits when an employer files that form UC 1921?
I can't speak, maybe Bill can, to how quickly that happens. So Bill, can you answer that question for the Senator?
No, we're processing that paperwork as quickly as possible, Senator. You know, as we've stated, UC is very complex. Everything's a case-by-case basis, so it takes time to work through that. And we will work with the employer and that employee to make a determination on whether they should be back at work or denied benefits.
So you're saying that that could extend over a period of several weeks, even though they should not be receiving benefits?
No, I don't think several weeks, Senator. And at the same time, if it's determined they should have been back or should have been denied unemployment, folks will have an overpayment assessed on their UC account.
That is my only question. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Santasero, you have a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Secretary, Deputy Secretaries, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And Mr. Secretary in particular, I want to thank you because as you said a few moments ago, you really are appearing here today in front of these two committees, and in some cases, some heated questions, as we saw just a few moments ago. And you're holding yourself accountable.
Absolutely.
You are here to explain to these committees, how the system has worked in unprecedented times. And, I frankly find that refreshing, particularly since we have a president of the United States who has unequivocally and publicly said that he bears no responsibility for anything related to this pandemic or any of the impacts of this pandemic. And yet here we have a state-level secretary, a member of our governor's cabinet, who is here before us and is holding himself accountable and his department accountable. And I appreciate that because that's a mark of leadership. And as is, by the way, what you said earlier about the Wolf administration, as early as January, having meetings talking about the coming pandemic, which, to her credit, Secretary Levine saw, all while at the federal level, the President of the United States was regularly ignoring his presidential daily briefings, many of his advisors who were telling him that this terrible pandemic was on its way, and was doing absolutely nothing for 2 months to take mitigation efforts that would have had a real impact on stopping the spread of the virus, and as a consequence, perhaps having enabled Pennsylvania and other states to have avoided the very worst economic results that we see now with these high unemployment rates. A president of the United States until early March was saying that this was all just going to go away. Really astounding.
Excuse me, Senator, do you have a question for Secretary Alexiak?
I do, Madam Chair, I do.
Thank
but
you.
I do think it's important that we put this in context because, I think it's very easy to be here today with this high level of unemployment and understandable frustration by many of our constituents, mine included, who are waiting for their benefits and whose benefits are taking a time to get to them because of the sheer volume of requests that are being made for both PUA and traditional unemployment benefits. So, Mr. Secretary, I guess my question for you is, it seems to me, based on what we've been talking about today, and it's probably not a surprise to anyone, that a lot of this delay is a consequence of that sheer volume and a consequence of the fact that over the last 40 years, in this era of trying to ever shrink government, we have fewer people who are able to actually do the work, the important work of government, which only, by the way, government can do in situations like this, to help people who are suffering and who are not now employed. You agree with that?
I do, Senator. It is a numbers question, and it is a number of, or a function of how people view the role of government. I would add one slight correction I want to make, sir, if I could. January was the first cabinet meeting that I remember the virus being discussed. I would almost guarantee that the governor and some of his staff and probably Secretary Levine were talking about it before that.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And please pass along my thanks to everyone in your department. And Madam Chair, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator, and I will reserve my questions regarding that issue for my second round. Senator Mensch.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And I appreciate your comments earlier about the subcommittee participation. I do want to add that we work with senior staff to ensure that there were majority and minority members of the subcommittee who are already members of either of these two committees. So there is minority as well as majority representation from the subcommittee in this hearing today, or at least they were invited if they chose not to participate. But there was no attempt to bias this purposely anyway to either side. Let me go on, Mr. Deputy Secretary O'Brien. Your comment about had we not closed those two centers, we would have more people to answer phones. You're absolutely right. But this argument cuts both ways. The reality is we were implementing the effects of technology, and we were reducing the human cost for the advantage of technology. So while we could have had those people there, had we made the investment in technology that we did, then we didn't need those people, or we would have had redundant cost. So I'm not sure that it's a legitimate argument to suggest that, well, we purposely discharged X number of people so that they couldn't answer phones or respond to citizen requests. So would you agree? You're muted. Right. There you go. There you go. Go ahead.
Sorry. Senator, we budgeted and brought back the amount of people we were able to bring back because of Act 60, okay? You had referenced things that happened in 2013, 2014, as far as technological spending. I wasn't here then. I can't comment on that.
I appreciate that. All I'm suggesting is the investment that we have made in technology has taken us to the point where we have fewer people who arguably, because of the technology, do more work. The pandemic notwithstanding, okay? So let's move on, and my additional questions have nothing to do with President Trump, but indeed go back to 2013 and come forward. And I said on my opening comments that so much of the issues that I see technologically transcend several administrations, Democrat and Republican, so that we're not trying to pick any kind of political fight here. But the reality is, well, let me go to another point. The mainframe. When I hear term mainframe, it concerns me, and because that's no longer contemporary thinking, I don't believe. takes me back to, and especially when I hear IBM and mainframe in the same phrase, I go back to the SNA architecture that IBM used to use, where by the design of the mainframe or the software, they create proprietary situations, even though they argue that they were an open shop. So where are we in terms of computer technology? Are we only mainframe? Does L&I have its own computer center? Do you use the state's corporate, what I will call the corporate computer center? I'll start there.
Senator, yeah. I mean, our benefit system is a mainframe-based system. The PUA system, which our vendor that we're working on, the benefit modernization program, is a web-based system. So yes, everything we currently do is via the mainframe. You know, a number of states across the country, unfortunately, are still using mainframe technology as well.
I'm just curious, is either the code or the software itself proprietary?
From a
Did that create the problems when we were getting to PUA?
From a mainframe perspective,
Yes, sir.
I can't answer that, but from a GSI perspective in the PUA, it is proprietary code.
So it's essentially just one vendor that can ever provide that solution.
Currently, yes, GSI is the vendor that has that technology.
And I understand why vendors do that, but you understand it also limits our flexibility, the state's flexibility, your department's flexibility in order to renegotiate or to move forward in other designs. Scalability comes into a situation like this when you have a mainframe and you had people working in the glass house, everyone desks next to one another, terminals there. When you dispersed your personnel and they began to work from home, how easy was that move? What did you have to do technologically to make changes? Dial-up services, I don't mean dial-up modem, but dialing in, retrofitting their personal laptops or tablets or what have you. How easy was that transition made?
You know, all things considered, what we were facing, we did it within a week. You know, we used virtual desktop technology. Our IT folks were able to get our service center staff up and running, a combination of both Commonwealth laptops. And again, kudos to our employees. There are a lot of employees using their own personal computers right now, and we continue, and our plan is to update that moving forward. But you know, I think our IT folks, our service center staff, they all stepped up, and we were able to accomplish that fairly quickly.
If this situation, as it dissipates and we do whatever we're going to do as an LNI and perhaps pull people back into a singular location, or at least several singular locations. And then we have another situation like this in 2 years or 5 years. How scalable does this become again? What is this experience? Where will we go the next time that we have a situation to socially distance ourselves, be able to provide the adequate protections for personnel?
No, I'll speak to that, and then if you want to jump in. Governor's already created at the cabinet level a path forward task group that includes representatives from business, labor, various agencies, looking at what are we going to do moving forward. No decisions have been made one way or the other about what it's going to look like. We just know that the world of work at the Commonwealth level will look different after this is done. We're already have an internal work group that Deputy Secretary O'Brien is heading in L&I to look at what are we going to look like? What are we learning as we're in the middle of this? So we understand what you're saying, Senator, and we are looking at what's it going to mean for teleworking? What's it going to mean for the BenMod system? We think you know, as crazy as these times are and as challenging as they are, the fact that our vendor who is working on BenMod has to make some of these calls now, we're learning what we can do for our Venmont system that will help if this happens again. So I appreciate your question, and I want you to know that it's something that we are at the state level, beyond my agency and within our agency, looking at very closely. Bill, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, Senator, one thing we won't do is buy desktop computers. It's laptops moving forward.
Yep.
But those are like simple things that we're learning moving forward. We've created a virtual mailroom that should be up and running every day, where our staff will be able to access the mail and work on claims from their homes. So, we continue to evolve as the situation moves forward.
Definitely something we have to do. And I talked about the quantization of the dollar expanding 4 times every 6 months in terms of the purchase of technology. And that's exactly what you're experiencing. And today, laptops are so much cheaper than desktops, and much more portable. They give you much more flexibility in the field itself, given any number of scenarios that we might discuss on an emergency situation. So
Senator Mann.
that's,
Sorry, forgive me.
yes.
Senator, forgive me for interrupting. In the interest of time, could we sum up? And we had said 1 question per person except for the chair. So if you wouldn't mind summarizing so we can move forward.
Sorry, I was staying on one line of thought. I have one last question, and that is the phone system. 2 years ago, we had the debacle with the phone systems. Where are we today? What was the adequacy of the telephone support of the computer services as your personnel transitioned to home?
Secretary, would you like, we changed, I believe it was November of 2018. We switched phone vendors. We use Genesis as our vendor. That continues to evolve as well, Senator. We make updates regularly. We meet once a month with our IT folks, our telecoms team. So when we rolled it out, we had issues, but that system continues to evolve and benefit claimants.
All right, thank you. Madam Chair Lady, I'm sorry. Back to you.
Thank you, Senator. We have a few more questions here, and if we could please try to move forward in a quick manner, because we do have a second panel. So Senator Costa, what is your question? Senator Costa, are you muted? Now you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? There we are. We're checking on our end, Senator Costa. One moment, please. We'll come back to you in just a moment, Senator Costa. My apologies. It looks as though you are unmuted, but we still can't hear you. I apologize. We'll come back to you if we can rectify the problem. So for now, Senator Langerholt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As everyone, I'm sure, on this panel, everyone in the General Assembly, my offices have been inundated. It's probably the #1 call that we receive in trying to help individuals deal with their unemployment compensation. And I share in the frustration that they share with me on a daily basis. And just emails, texts, comments, I'm going to read a few. What about people like me who've been waiting this entire time for extensions because my benefits have exhausted? Not a single penny this entire shutdown. My last day of work was March 18th, signed up for unemployment, nothing. Got my PIN card, nothing, still nothing. Unemployment Service Center should be open 24 days till this is over. I'm getting ready to open the slum back up. I'm getting ready to lose everything. Can't get a hold of anyone. What am I supposed to do? Next, if we do not or cannot proceed with weekly filing, how are we to get paid? Can you please get us some answers? It's been 5 weeks now. 3 since the CARES Act was signed and the state launched a program that's only partially functional. Next, I'm going on 6 weeks with no financial assistance whatsoever. No stimulus check, No loans, no UC. I applied for the new PUA, but it's stating it can take 21 days to get approved. That would be 9 weeks with no income. Most likely longer until funds are received. How can they expect people to survive? This site has nothing that helps, can't get answers. How are we going to pay our bills and feed our families? 32 years of work, never claimed for unemployment, and this is what you get. That's just a sample of the frustration that we're dealing with, and I'm sure everyone is dealing with that as well. I want to know, I know that my staff will send one email a day to the department and kind of log those people that call in that have concerns and questions. We then send that daily with a list of those people to check on different types of benefits for the department to get, to see if we can't help move along the process or get them some answers. The last time we received the response from the department, those daily emails, our staff, my district offices, April 17th. What do I tell the people that continually call my office looking for answers? If we can't even get a response, our legislative offices, April 17th. My staff tells me now, if you go in and file on email, the automated return email says it'll take 33 days for a response. What are you doing to address this? And I understand that these are historic numbers. I get that. But what is your plan going forward here? I understand you may have gotten more intake staff or trying to hire more people, but what plan have you developed as you see these issues coming? And I guess more specifically, why no response from your department to our legislative offices? These are people that are reaching out, that are crying, that are desperate, that are at their end. I mean, literally at their end. They may not eat tomorrow. And we can't even get a response from the department going on almost a month. Our legislative office, what are you doing to rectify that? Please tell me you have developed a plan to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. We are frustrated as well. I've said that throughout this testimony. We are not interested in denying people their benefits or holding their dollars back. We are doing all we can as quickly as we can. Let me address a few of your specifics. I will check with our legislative office to see why you haven't heard back. I'm sure that you will. I'll guarantee that you will hear back. We are processing those claims. All those emails you mentioned, we get them too. And some of them are things that we can help with pretty quickly. Some of them are much more involved. All those claims that have not been, are not considered clean claims, where it's pretty basic, they get handled right away. That 30% is where we are having trouble. And we talked about that before, that requires manual intervention. And we understand it's very difficult. I believe me, I get those emails too. And it's devastating to hear that. I sleep pretty well. I have not slept well during this crisis. I can tell you that. I feel what you're telling me. I've talked to people, and it's very difficult, as you have, to hear their stories. We do have a very detailed plan that we have worked out with our IT staff, our unemployment compensation staff, our HR staff, with the governor's office, that we are implementing as we speak. It does involve some of those intake interviewers that you mentioned. It does involve people from other agencies. It does involve upgrades to technology. We are doing all we can as quickly as we can. And one of the, there are many, when we have an opportunity after this is done, when we look back, there will be many things that we will learn. One of the things that the first place that people have to go to in Pennsylvania is unemployment. We don't have some of the worker protections that many other states have. So we are the first line when people have experiences like this. So they're the kind of things we need to look at. How do we protect our working men and women? I know that does not help someone who has to pay a bill today or feed their family tomorrow. There are other resources available through, if you go on the governor's website, there are COVID-19 resources. DCED has resources available for people. The Department of Human Services. We are doing all we can as an administration and certainly as an agency to respond to those people who we do care very deeply about. I don't know what else to tell you, sir.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you,
Langerhall. Thank you,
Madam Chair.
Secretary. Senator Baker?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Secretary, for your testimony. I must say, though, as a former chair of the Labor and Industry Committee, the track record the department has had in operating the UC claim system hasn't instilled confidence for me for a long period of time, a number of years. And your past performance really has been something that is difficult to wrap your arms around given the amount of funding that we've provided. The complaints, as you heard from Senator Langerhulk, are pouring in. I can't keep up with it. I can't tell you how frustrated citizens are and angry. And the idea that we can't give a time frame even to people who reach out through us. What about all those people who are waiting who don't reach out through an elected official? So the frustration is particularly high. It goes back to Auditor General D. Pasquale's report in 2017 that basically said the computer system was held together by bubblegum and it would be an insult to bubblegum. So we've known the problems have existed for some time, and it's frustrating to hear that we're not very far along in that process. I won't belabor that point. I think it's been very well addressed, but you are also tasked with recovery. And I'd like to know who in your department is planning for how that recovery happens and how that will unfold for small and large businesses, many who I'm hearing from are not going to survive, who are concerned about vanishing crucial jobs, community cornerstones like hospitality, travel industry in my district. And, who are you working with? Industry groups that are advising the administration in your department on how to develop best practices, how to reopen properly. How are we engaging these important companies? Many states already have advisory groups in place, and I just heard you mention perhaps you're putting a plan together. Do we have a plan? Can we have a copy of that plan? Because moving forward, people want to know that there is real planning and forethought being put together, not just on the claims for today, but how do we recover and move forward? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator, for your question. A couple things I want to react to in your initial statements. We're very familiar with the Auditor General's report. I will tell you that most of what was in that report, we were working on when that report came out. When I came on to UC in 2017, came on to Labor and Industry in 2017, unemployment compensation was the #1 issue because of the situation with IBM, because of the impending Auditor General's report, because of the problems with the benefits modernization system. In the time from when we got together and got the vendor, GSI, and began an open, transparent process with the legislative team, with the legislative chambers, we have had very few questions until now about UC. Things were going pretty well. We were well on our way and still are well on our way to having that system upgraded in October of this year. So that's one thing. The other thing I'll mention, and I had said this earlier, I am part of the governor's Path Forward work group. And it includes cabinet officers, people from the chamber, people from labor, people from the health community that are looking at what do we need to do? What's the plan that will help.
Are there specific advisory groups who've been identified? And can you share that through the chairs? I'd like to know that we have a plan in place with industry-specific individuals stepping forward to help prepare us for a pathway forward. And so far, you're just kind of giving generalities that don't instill confidence, in my mind.
Path Forward Group is a function of the governor's office. That will be their determination, how much of that they want to go public right now. We have our own internal work group, and we are working on that. This is not just, gee, what are we going to do? There are hard decisions that are being made and concrete plans that are being developed. We're doing that internally as well with our the internal work group that I mentioned, Deputy Secretary O'Brien is heading. What are we going to look like as an agency after this is done? We do have a plan right now, and we'll hopefully we can share that with you. It's an internal document. We don't want to hide anything, but we want to make sure it's understandable. So we will look at that document and see how much of that is relevant to share. We have a plan for the immediate term of what we are doing to get people trained as they are coming on, these new people that we're hiring, these people from other agencies. And we're also looking at what are we going to need when this crisis has been not resolved.
I'm not just talking about a plan for your agency moving forward. I'm talking about a plan for the businesses of the Commonwealth. And you're the head of the agency that I think should be part of leading that with DCED and others. And I think what we need is a plan forward as well. Very strongly believe that. And I'm concerned that the average person who's operating a business that may not survive, that could vanish and go away, is not going to be able to survive and not have a real pathway forward. Thank you, Madam Chair.
If I could comment.
Sure.
Yes, sir. Yes.
This is a global pandemic, a national pandemic. We are part of the answer at the state government. There are federal issues as well. When I talk about the governor's advisory Path Forward Committee, it is doing exactly the things that you are asking. Exactly that. We are working on that right now. As a matter of fact, I had a meeting of one of those subcommittees at 2:30 that I said that I wouldn't be a part of because of the testimony today. So we are working at the state level. We are working across the agencies to address the very issues that you are raising. We take this work very seriously, Senator, very seriously.
Thank you, Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Baker. I don't think that Senator Costa is able. Are you there, Senator Costa? I know you have to jump off quickly, but no. Okay. Well, thank you. I apologize for our technical difficulties. Our last question for this particular panel is Senator Pittman. Unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary, you mentioned that the cabinet was having discussions back in January about how to respond to COVID-19. Is that correct?
That's the first that I remember, first cabinet meeting where we talked about this virus in China and what's it going to do and how are we going to handle it when it comes to us? Yes.
So why did the governor never mention it in his budget address?
I can't speak to that. I think at that time there was still a lot of uncertainty and still a lot of questions about it, but I can't speak to why the governor did or did not mention it in his address.
But you were having internal conversations about your concerns over the capacity to deal with the impending crisis, but it was never brought to the General Assembly in advance for us to consider how to react?
We were having internal conversations in labor and industry, yes.
Okay. What about at your budget hearing, Appropriations Committee?
I don't remember that coming up.
So you didn't bring to us any concerns that you had about responding to the pandemic at that time?
I can't, Senator, I'd be happy to go back and look at the time frame and where all these things fell into line and a timeline, but I don't remember having the kind of concerns that were apparent pretty early once this hit.
Well, if you can remember talking about it in January, I think you'd remember whether or not you brought the concerns to us at the appropriations hearing in February.
I don't want to oversell the conversations that were being had. These were very preliminary. This was before anybody really knew what the impact was going to be. This was some preliminary planning discussions. It was not about here is what we are definitely going to do. This was at a time when the federal government was saying it was not going to be an issue. So I'm not sure what
Well, I appreciate you clarifying that, because I just heard from one of my colleagues about how great it was that the governor was talking about this crisis so early compared to the federal administration. Yet I was struck that those conversations must have been held pretty close to the vest, because nobody asked us for a thing prior to these conversations. We heard nothing in the governor's budget address about the pandemic. We heard nothing during appropriations hearings about the pandemic. And so I find it to be a little disingenuous to say that there was this grand plan occurring in January and prior to deal with it whenever nobody brought it to us. So I think it's important that you keep that in context. And lastly, you know, I would encourage you, and I appreciate your transparency today, but maybe you want to consider becoming part of the daily press briefings. I appreciate the Secretary of Health daily updating us, but I find that there are a lot of unemployment compensation questions that occur during those hearings, and the Secretary understandably is unable to answer them. I've also found that the governor is unable to answer unemployment compensation questions as well. And so I think it would be helpful to have you there. I think we were all disappointed that the governor inadvertently encouraged people to commit unemployment compensation fraud. And perhaps if you were there, that wouldn't have happened. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just if I could make one comment, Senator, I never said that there was a grand plan being created in January. That was not the level of the conversations that I was a part of.
Thank you, Senator Pittman. Senator Udicek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. I will be brief, but I do want to go down through a timeline. You have already established early conversations in January at the cabinet level on COVID-19 crisis in the world and in Pennsylvania. February 1st, the Department of Health activated its Operations Command Center at Pima. March 6th, the governor declared an emergency in Pennsylvania. And on March 19, the governor shut down a large swath of the Pennsylvania economy, shut down businesses under the force of his emergency declaration order. My question is, at any time along the way from January, those early conversations with the cabinet till March 19, was labor and industry or any of your boards, for example, the Pennsylvania Workforce Development Board that has members of organized labor, leaders of organized labor, as well as leaders of private sector industry, were you consulted as a cabinet secretary? Was the department consulted on the governor's executive order to shut down businesses in Pennsylvania?
We were consulted on many things as this played out, specifically related to the executive order. I would have to go back and look, but I know that I had regular conversations with the governor's policy office, the chief of staff, the deputy chief of staff, a lot of internal work. So we were fully aware of the direction that things were going as it played out, as it developed. This was something that happened relatively quickly.
Well, and I understand that, but a member of the Workforce Development Board from Northeastern Pennsylvania, Chris Hackett, recently resigned from the board, emphatically stated that the Workforce Development Board was not consulted. And the reason that I pressed the question, you have some experienced professional public servants on your staff. Two of them happen to be on the call today that I've worked with over the last 2 decades, Deputy Secretary O'Brien and Trusky. their input is valued on legislation that we move through the General Assembly. I think their input would have been valued by the governor in signing an executive order shutting down businesses, putting 1.7 million Pennsylvanians out of work. If you look at the timeline, March 15, we had less than 5,000 claims in that week for unemployment. Today, we have approaching 1.8 million. There's only one person. I'm in a unique position. Yes, I want the Republican president held accountable for his actions as an independent, and I want a Democratic governor held accountable for his action, because there's only one person, as I can see, and from your answer, that there wasn't collaboration with labor and industry and its boards, the private sector and with organized labor on putting together an order, an unprecedented order to shut down large swaths of the economy that would lead to an overwhelming of your system. We understand your staff has done everything it can to ramp up, but you certainly could not have been prepared to deal with 1.8 million claims. But we could have been prepared and better prepared to mitigate the economic damage and mitigate potentially the loss of jobs across Pennsylvania if there would have been more collaboration among the administration, its cabinet secretaries, private sector, and organized labor to mitigate the impact on the Pennsylvania economy. So I think it's clear by your answer, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there wasn't a consultation, there wasn't input on that executive order at that cabinet level with the Department of Labor and Industry.
Senator, I will get more specific information for you, but we were involved through our policy office, the governor's policy office, the governor's chief of staff, in answering any questions that came up, making any recommendations that we felt were necessary. So I think it's not quite the consultation that you're referencing. We were involved to some degree, as all. I mean, I can't speak for all cabinet agencies, but I know that's how the governor operates. So we were involved at some level through our policy office, through our legislative office, through our the chief of staff's office, in all through this process.
Mr. Secretary, would there be any documentation of that? For example, a recommendation to follow the federal guidelines, the CISA guidelines that are used by 45 other states, that might have been one of the recommendations that came from you and your staff, or was it just informal conversations around the executive order to shut down Pennsylvania business?
I'd have to go back and look to see what kind of, to be honest, Senator, we are neck deep in dealing with the issues we're dealing with now, and that has not been something I've thought about. But we can go back and look. We have been, and I think that the chairs will, at the House and Senate level, will attest to this. We have been as open and transparent as possible with the members of the legislature. That's why we've done the caucus trainings. That's why we've done the staff trainings. That's why we've done the calls and the town halls. We don't have anything to hide. And if there's anything that I can find that helps answer your question, we'll get it to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Secretary. And thank you, our first panel, for your insight and for your lengthy comments. We will move on to our second panel. I'm sorry that we won't have a second round of questions for this one, but in the interest of time, which we are basically out of, we will be moving to the second panel, and we will prepare for them to join us. Thank you.
Thank you all.
If you could each please limit your testimony to 5 minutes in the interest of time. We do have your written testimony that we can share with all of the committee members, but we'd like to move forward with your testimony as summarized so that we can get to questions, if you don't mind. Mr. Hackett and Mr. Helper, what are you hearing from employers in terms of challenges recalling employees to work? Excuse me. I'm just going to I'll let you introduce yourselves, excuse me. Mr. Hackett, if you would please introduce yourself and make an opening statement.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to provide testimony to these committees. My name is Chris Hackett, and I'm the CEO of a small manufacturing business here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Would you like me to make my comments now or wait for other introductions?
Yes, please go ahead with your comments. Thank you.
So I was appointed about 5 years ago by Governor Wolf to sit on the Workforce Development Board. As Senator Udicek recently mentioned, I had resigned recently. Just as background, the Workforce Development Board is an organization consisting of elected officials, organized labor, and business people like myself. Unfortunately, I felt compelled to resign my position in protest because of comments made by Governor Wolf during a press conference. To better frame the situation, Governor Wolf was asked if an employee is recalled from layoff, can they continue to access UC benefits? His reply was an emphatic no. And I feel it's imperative that the record be corrected because that is factually incorrect. What I'd like to do is share with you a recent exchange I had with the CEO of a large food processing business. He had seen a newspaper article that detailed my resignation. And he said that he recently recalled a number of team members and several did not and would not return. The reason these employees cited was the comment made by the governor regarding their ability to stay on unemployment compensation as the reason. This is an example of the unintended consequences of this type of comment going uncorrected. But what I want to do is further connect the dots regarding the food supply. If we think about it, if workers aren't returning to manufacturing to support our food supply, we only need to look at the nearly empty shelves in many supermarkets to realize that there are unintended and very negative consequences of this type of comment going uncorrected. And so, but then the governor followed up his comment with an explanation. And it was something along the lines of, well, I was a prior business owner, and there's a simple answer to this question. Businesses should simply pay people more. Frankly, I was in disbelief that the chief executive of the state was saying this. First, where do the dollars come from to fund the UC system? They come from a payroll tax. If there's no payroll, there are no payroll taxes, and the system is not sustainable. The lack of sustainability has clearly been proven in 8 short weeks. As noted a short time ago during this hearing, we were at 180% with a path towards 250% by summer that represents full funding. But now we are facing the need to borrow again from the federal government to meet the benefit commitments we've made. But more importantly, how could the governor ever think that businesses could possibly just increase wages by $15 an hour to offset the higher level of government benefits? How? If a business did this, there would surely be no jobs at that business in the near term, as they would no longer be competitive. This is clearly in conflict with the principles of free markets that this country was founded upon. There's no question that we need to help citizens of this great Commonwealth during these challenging times. But resources paid to individuals who have the opportunity to return to their prior position will take resources from those that truly need them. As we have limited resources, as I noted before, we should not and cannot provide those resources to individuals who don't have a need. But during this hearing, if I heard him correctly, Bill Tursky noted that all claims are handled on a case-by-case basis, and thus the delay in ending benefits are no longer due. This is not how systems work. Imagine if Google handled each search on a case-by-case basis. It's just not possible. If we don't aggressively get people back to work and contributing to the economy during this downturn, it'll be even longer and more painful for everyone. But I want to be clear, I'm not advocating for an uncontrolled process. We need to follow the CDC or OSHA guidelines for worker safety. We need to continue to be thoughtful, diligent, and measured in our approach. But instead of facilitating cooperation, the governor's response has created more questions than answers that has led to a real trust gap. The opaque process of waivers is but a symptom of the lack of transparency. Unfortunately, the results speak for themselves. We are currently ranked 47th in the unemployment rate. A sign to me something is very wrong with our process of managing the pandemic. And what's even harder to imagine is our unemployment rate is worse than both New York and New Jersey. We must all pull together to unite in a vision that supports a return to economic prosperity for all. Our goal today should be to identifying ways to get back to the highly competitive employment market where businesses are competing for talent. It is a proven way to raise wages and create opportunities. In my view, the choice is not between reopening or staying closed. The choice is between an orderly, disciplined, and transparent opening and chaos. One where individuals and businesses know the rules so they can plan and act. Just give us the rules and we will optimize the response and support the safe renewal of our economy. Thank you again for letting me share my views.
Thank you, Mr. Hackett. Our next testifier is Alex Halper, Director of Government Affairs for the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry. The Chamber represents almost 10,000 member businesses of all sizes and industry sectors across the state, ranging from sole proprietorship to Fortune 100 companies. If you would limit your comments to 5 minutes, please.
Yes, Madam Chair, and thank you for the invitation to be part of this discussion. Thank you to Chairwoman Tartaglione, Chairwoman Phillips-Hill, and Chairman Carney. Unemployment compensation has been a focus of the public response to the pandemic from the very early days. It's been clear that legislators intended for the UC system to be expanded beyond its traditional role in order to meet the needs of individuals, to help drive support and funding to individuals impacted by the pandemic. That decision makes sense. This was an existing program with existing infrastructure with which there was familiarity. So it did make sense to utilize an existing system. Doing so, of course, required a number of adjustments, temporary adjustments to make that work. So, for example, and it's been mentioned, waiving the work search requirement, expanding eligibility to categories of individuals who typically are not eligible. So sole proprietors, independent contractors, small business owners, enhancing the benefits through federal funding. All of these were adjustments made to an existing system in order to, again, meet the need. And I think recognizing that those adjustments are temporary and focused on this current emergency is important. We have been hearing much of the same feedback from claimants that has been described today, and it is disheartening. It is tragic how individuals are being impacted. It does seem to be a confluence of really tragic, unfortunate circumstances that has created the situation that we're in today, some of which was unavoidable. Other issues, we think do require some attention. So obviously the surge in claims was inevitable through the economic slowdown and the business shutdown, as well as these new categories of individuals being eligible, many of whom are not experienced with unemployment compensation. If they've had any interaction with the system, it may have been from the side of, from the perspective of an employer. So that no doubt has added to some of the problems and the slower process that we're experiencing. Of course, just the nature of the shutdown, and Senator Udicak got into just the expansive nature of what we dealt with in Pennsylvania. That has certainly added to this surge in claims. The technology infrastructure, won't belabor that point, but that has long been a challenging problem, and certainly the problems with the previous vendor have contributed to that. We also have, for years advocated for improvements to the unemployment compensation law. The law includes a number of vague terms and is open to significant interpretation that does require a more laborious process to go through. That can be frustrating during normal times, but when you're talking about 1.7, 1.8 million claims, to require a claims reviewer to go through individual claims when there is so much latitude and subjectivity in the process, that certainly slows things down. And then as we've discussed, this trend we're seeing of employees who are either quitting their job or refusing offers to return to work if they've been furloughed because they are finding they're able to make more in unemployment compensation than under regular wages. That, of course, has has broad implications, not just for the individuals who, again, could be potentially committing fraud, but for employers who are looking to restart, and hopefully that number will grow in the days and weeks to come. But how are we supposed to have an economic rebound if individuals are opting not to return to the workforce? There are a number of ways that we do believe the law can be strengthened to improve the process. And we just appreciate both committees' attention on this important issue, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you for keeping it to exactly 5 minutes. That was great. Our next testifier is, and I hope I don't butcher your name, but Julia Simon Michel. Close? Okay.
Michelle.
Michelle. Oh, okay. All right. Well, thank you for the correction, Michelle. Supervising attorney for the Unemployment Compensation Unit in Philadelphia, legal assistance. The organization provides free civil legal services to low-income Philadelphians. The Unemployment Compensation Unit assists individuals with filing for benefits and represents claimants that meet eligibility and merit guidelines at unemployment comp appeals hearings. Ms. Simon Michelle also serves on the Unemployment Compensation Benefits Modernization Advisory Committee, which is tasked with providing oversight of the implementation of the department's new UC Benefits computer system. If you would please make your statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you to the committees for inviting me to provide testimony on the experience of workers filing for benefits during this pandemic. As of March 16th, Philadelphia Legal Assistance became the leading non-governmental source of information to communities across the Commonwealth about unemployment compensation and the federal extension programs. We have interacted with countless individuals who have been filing for benefits and community organizations and local officials. I want to start by saying thank you to the department, because despite the incredible pain and frustration that I know many workers are feeling, and I know that because I've talked to them myself, the department has really taken an all hands on deck approach to this crisis. And I know that the staff in the service centers care deeply about this program and are working long hours to help people, and that leadership has worked tirelessly to respond to this crisis. So thank you truly for all of your work. Unemployment is a vital safety net, and Pennsylvanians are fortunate during this time that our Commonwealth has good law on the books to support workers who have lost their job through no fault of their own, which by far and away is pretty much everyone during this pandemic. Unemployment benefits will keep more workers above water than any other program during this time. I've personally seen the impact of these benefits on thousands of workers throughout my time at Philadelphia Legal Assistance. The last thing we want to do is make any changes that will in any way decrease access to these vital benefits. It's also important to note, as was mentioned briefly earlier, that we're in a position here in Pennsylvania where federal funding for our agency has decreased so significantly over the last decade. And in fact, at least 36 states, including Pennsylvania, have to rely on supplemental state funding just to run the program in normal times, let alone during a pandemic. Now, despite the department's good work, people are still hurting. I don't need to tell you those stories. You have heard them through countless calls from your constituents, and they have been well covered by the media. First, it's important to note that despite the historic number of claims, there are still many workers across the Commonwealth who have been unable to file. That's because without telephone access, individuals who lack technology access or need language assistance have been unable to even file initial claims for both unemployment compensation or pandemic unemployment assistance. These individuals need access, and they need a channel by which they can file applications. Second, the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance, or PUA, rollout has been highly problematic. The program will be a lifesaver for individuals across the Commonwealth. We have gaping holes in our state law that have left much of the modern workforce out in the cold. Only due to the new federal program will those workers now receive benefits. The self-employed, freelancers, independent contractors, workers with insufficient wage history, gig workers, and many more. In fact, for the members of this committee, I'm sure that for a lot of the small businesses you work for, PUA is their best opportunity to put money in their pockets during this crisis. Now, there are significant issues and glitches with the application, and again, a lot of people have not been able to apply that want to and should be eligible. People are getting kicked out of the system and apply multiple times but can't ever get through. Those individuals have no recourse. They have no way to appeal getting kicked out of the system. They need to be allowed to file their claims. The application as it stands just does not reflect the conditions under which this very different segment of the workforce functions, and we need to update the technology to reflect that and to provide substantial instructions and guidance to people about how to file these claims and what this system is going to look like. If anything, this rollout has only confirmed what I've learned from my national research about modernizing unemployment computer systems, which is that there is an incredible need for significant user testing before the deployment of any new systems, because issues like this cannot be identified by a vendor. They can only be identified by real people who use the system. Right now, a lot of people are lost and confused. We are continuing to put out information at Philadelphia Legal Assistance. I hope that your offices, and I know they are doing the same, but we must improve communications with the public. That is a key part of what the department needs to do to let people know where they stand. And finally, just to quickly address this question of individuals returning to work, in Pennsylvania, you are allowed to refuse an offer of work if it is not suitable. And that is a big question now when there are significant health and safety concerns at a lot of workplaces that are trying to reopen, and a lot of workplaces are trying to bring people back after cutting their wages or cutting benefits. And a lot of individuals are also not in a similar situation in terms of access to transportation or having childcare needs now because schools are closed and camps may be closed soon as well. So we need to take a real hard look at what we're talking about if we're shifting blame to workers in this situation when really their health and safety is a primary concern as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Our first question is from Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill. Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few questions, and thank you so much for your testimony and hanging in there with us today. This has gone a little longer than we had thought, but there's so much important information that we're gleaning from this. So really appreciate your patience and you being here to testify today. Mr. Hackett, you noted that our unemployment compensation rates, those people who are out of work, are much higher than New York and New Jersey. If you on the panel could please speculate or share why you think Pennsylvania has the second highest number of unemployment compensation claimants in the country, just behind California, when our population nationally ranks 5th. Shouldn't our unemployment compensation claims figures be proportional to our population figures?
Well, Senator, I think you raise a great point, and maybe to put some additional texture around it, Pennsylvania represents about 4% of the national workforce, and currently we have 7% of the unemployment. So clearly there's really an issue here. It's my opinion that really the way we shut down the state and really this process of waivers and which businesses were kept open and which weren't, and it was not at all clear, and shutting down construction, it just had no system to it. And I think that's what's thrown so many people out of work and to unemployment, rather than trying to figure out ways that we minimize damage to the economy and keep individuals working safely as much as possible. And I just want to make one comment. I don't think any of us in business are suggesting that we bring back workers in unsafe work environments. I think that's one of the great hallmarks of business leaders is we care about our teams and we want to make sure they're as safe as we are. And I will tell you, as of last Friday, I had 33 days in a row that I was here at my manufacturing plant with our team, because I thought it was very, very important that if I was asking them to be here, I would be here as well.
Thank you very much. In terms of the notification and collaboration, the Secretary had testified in the previous panel that discussions began in the administration in January and February and then in the beginning of March. Can you talk about the amount of notification and collaboration that the business community has had with the administration throughout the pandemic, whether it be on the mandated business closures or the subsequent unemployment compensation challenges and updates? I mean, as you noted earlier, payroll taxes fund a large part of the system, and they are paid by employees and employers, so I would think it incumbent that everyone work together for the efficiency of the system.
To start with the first part of your question, I think the Workforce Development Board that I was honored to serve on would have been a great sounding board because, again, it was composed of a mix of organized labor, business people such as myself, also legislators, and I believe 5 members of the governor's cabinet. And to me, it seemed like a perfect mix to provide insight, suggestions, and ideas as to how this may be best handled. And to my knowledge, that ready-made sounding board was not utilized at all.
Senator, I would note that we at the PA Chamber held an unemployment compensation webinar a few weeks ago. We had around 1,200 people, employers, who participated in that. Deputy Secretary Trusky presented on that webinar, as well as an attorney from the department. So we were very appreciative of that. We have certainly been trying to direct input from our members and Pennsylvania employers to the administration and lawmakers as these issues are being discussed.
Thank you. And for Ms. Simon Michelle, if you could, you know, much of your testimony really spoke to me, and I was watching the comments coming up on social media, you know, people saying, I filed the 21st, I haven't gotten anything. I've been waiting 33 days. I'm at 34 days as of this morning. You know, I'm receiving text messages. I'm standing here on the floor, and, you know, one that's saying, you know, my assistant applied the end of March. She hasn't received anything. She's paid. She has a W-2. She's also an independent contractor. Help, she needs some clarification. The testimony today was confusing. Should she apply for regular unemployment compensation, or should she apply for the PUA? Does she need to be denied first, right? And so you make a good point that as a result of this closure, a lot of people have been thrown into the unemployment compensation system who've never been there before, who don't understand how this works. What can the system do to be more user-friendly, to help explain to people who never thought they could ever be there, who find themselves there? How can we help them better navigate the system?
Thank you, Senator. That's a great question. I'll first note that, as you said, there are so many people accessing benefits right now who have never interacted with the system, whether that's longtime W-2 workers who have consistently worked, or everyone now eligible for pandemic unemployment assistance. It's also important to note that pandemic unemployment assistance is not paid out of the state trust fund. We are fully reimbursed by the federal government for everyone who is collecting benefits under that program. But because it's brand new and these individuals, their eligibility is a different analysis than regular unemployment, they really need guidance about how that's going to be evaluated. My understanding is that almost everyone who applies for PUA who's not eligible for UC should be eligible. In fact, that's what the DOL, the federal guidance, has come out and said. It is really meant as a safety net to cover everyone who's not covered by regular unemployment right now. I think we need to have more communication in terms of emails to individuals who are in the unemployment system. I think if we have text messaging capacity, we should be doing that. I think there need to be more updates on the website and Facebook. Communication is key, and people just need it. I'll also note that a lot of the people who are waiting, there is a delay in processing claims, but they all have to get past the first stage of financial eligibility. And that is a really confusing topic for a lot of lawyers who've done this for a very long time, let alone people new to the system. So I think we really need clear guidance for folks, and I know we have it on our website, who are denied financial eligibility for the March claims they all ran and filed, to know whether they should appeal, whether they should file a new claim now that the quarter has shifted, or whether they should go to the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. I think if we can get clarity on that to a lot of people, that will really help answer a lot of the questions that we are all getting.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Senator Kristin Phillips-Hill. Senator Carney?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the testimony, it was mentioned that workers are refusing to come to work, increasingly becoming an issue. I've heard from many workers, many of whom may be immunocompromised, who've called my office looking for relief because they're scared to be called back to work. People they feel like they're currently being forced to work in crowded and unsanitary conditions. I think we've all seen the images of people, for example, in the meatpacking places up in Berks County. News reports every day demonstrate that workers' needs are being ignored by employers. I understand Mr. Hackett from the way he described what he's doing. He doesn't represent necessarily every workplace and every manufacturer, but I appreciate the work that he's doing. How should people have to choose between their job and their health and their family's health? What do we think? How should we trust employers' promises to protect workers when their experiences don't seem to play that up or to match that?
Well, go ahead, Alex.
Thank you. And thank you, Senator, for that question. And I think you raise some very important points. I can tell you that the employers, with whom we're communicating, have always been, but are particularly focused on workplace safety and the health and safety of their employees. You do raise an important distinction in this broad category of individuals who are refusing to come to work. Some are no doubt have pre-existing medical conditions or live with someone with an underlying condition and may have a very specific and legitimate reason why they do not believe that they can leave their home. Sort of on the other side of the scale, we are hearing direct input from employers who say employees have done the calculation. They are able to make more money on unemployment and have simply opted to pursue that track. And then I think you have a group of employees in the middle who have kind of general health concerns and safety concerns. And I think that gets to the trying to put some specificity and clarity into the unemployment compensation law. Ms. Simon Michelle makes a great point in terms of clarity, and employees are, as she noted, able to refuse work if it's not suitable. But how do you define suitability? And we think that we can look to adherence to CDC guidelines, to Department of Health guidelines. There are standards that can be set, and we certainly encourage the legislature to consider adopting some of those standards through legislation so that there is absolute clarity. So someone knows, if I meet these conditions, I am considered eligible. But if I do not meet these conditions, I probably will not be eligible, and it's required of me to accept this offer of work.
So, Senator, if I may respond to that as well?
Sure.
So I understand the desire for some clarity, but our law has significant precedent around suitable work already. And really what is required for individuals is a personal analysis. The unemployment compensation law, as the Deputy Secretary said, is an individualized assessment across the board in every single type of case. That's how the law works here. That's how the law works everywhere else in the country. What we would encourage for workers who fear for their safety in these situations, number one, there should be no straight refusals of work. If you're concerned, express that to your employer. Put that in writing. put what your concerns are in writing, explain why you're hesitant to come back, and give the employer an opportunity to address them, right? That's what the back and forth should be. That's how we really determine the full facts of the situation. And so we would encourage folks to do that, to communicate with their employers, find out what measures have been put in place for their safety, find out what, if anything, is different about the job they're being asked to come back to than the one they left, because that raises issues under the law. And again, if there are new situations in their life that make the work no longer suitable for them, they need to inform the employer of that. So really, I would encourage communication, especially given the circumstances right now, written communication, and that can help people balance the need to both return to work and have a paycheck with benefits, but also to maintain their health and safety and that of their families.
Thank you very much for that. What this really kind of points out is that the types of workers we have who typically enjoy the least amount of protections are the ones who are now being called heroes for doing their jobs. It's a contradiction that's very difficult to kind of to figure out. So I appreciate both the comments, and
Thank you, Senator. I have just a few questions before moving along as quickly as I can. This question would be, I would imagine, for Alex Halper. I have weekly conference calls with Gene Barr, president of the chamber, as well as David Taylor with PMA, and we're working together on what this looks like rolling forward. Because with the institution of this stoppage, of this shutdown, especially when the words life-sustaining businesses were used, I think that convoluted the process a lot. I know that other states weren't using that particular terminology. Their focus, and which would have alleviated this massive unemployment problem, their focus was on being sure that they closed businesses that had direct face-to-face communication with their customers and clients. There are so many, literally thousands of businesses across this Commonwealth that could have remained open, doing business with zero customer contact, and that was not the case. We have, again, as was stated prior, Pennsylvania at first was the only state in the country that did not allow construction, the only one. So that spiked our unemployment numbers by tens and tens of thousands. So my question would be, because there wasn't enough buy-in in the beginning of this process, there wasn't even buy-in of the governor's office with the 4 leaders of both chambers. There wasn't buy-in from the Chamber of Commerce of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, the NFIB, the Pennsylvania Automobile Association, the Realtors Association, Restaurant Association. None of these people that are in the know were part of the process to shut everything down. My question is to you, what are we doing moving forward to alleviate this nightmare tsunami of unemployment claims that are nearly impossible to fulfill? What are we looking at, and what are these plans to move forward to get these people off the unemployment roll, to alleviate this problem? And what plans are in place, and how are you being recruited to be part of that process?
Well, it is certainly our hope, and again, looking forward, our hope that as regions of the country, as regions of the Commonwealth, as some of these restrictions are loosened, we are able to learn best practices and recognize that employers are taking the necessary steps to help ensure the health and safety of their employees, of their customers, of their vendors. And as those experiences are observed, that leads to more flexibility and more safe opening of businesses, with again a real emphasis on safety. For example, as we're seeing, just again by way of example, over the last couple weeks, as the LCB system has authorized their facilities to initiate curbside pickup. We have heard from many employers since that system has been implemented that they believe that they could adopt a similar approach for their workplaces that minimizes or completely eliminates any interaction with the customers, but still allows them to sell their goods and hopefully still allows them to bring people back into work and start to remove individuals from the unemployment rules, which I know is everyone's goal. So again, the hope from our standpoint is that moving forward, we're able to adopt more broadly some of these, some of the flexibility and some of the loosening that we're seeing done successfully in other regions of the country and in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. And to expand on that just a little bit, we know that entrepreneurs and business owners and creators are very ingenious in their process. They can see around corners when it comes to how to better facilitate their means of revenue, selling their product, changing, adapting. And to your point exactly, there are a lot of individuals out there who have businesses that even if there were customer contact, they could convert that fairly easily. Many of them. I'll cite an example of Louisiana. There is a woman with a gift shop in Louisiana who was suffering greatly because of their closure down there, and she decided to go live on Facebook with a lot of her customers, and then she would have FaceTime appointments with individual customers, and she would walk through the store showing all of these different items for sale. She would package those up, gift wrap, however she could manage to do it. But our entrepreneurs have ingenuity, and if we would merely bring them in before this process started, I think that we would have alleviated a huge number of these unemployment claims. And I know moving out of this, if we help them to be creative and allow them to be creative, we will see a drastic reduction in the need for unemployment claims and PUA. So I appreciate you reiterating that point for me. I have a question here for Ms. Simon Michelle about this program that we have that's supposed to go live in October, this new unemployment comp process, this new system. I'm hoping that is really the case, but again, a lot of us are not putting a lot of eggs in that basket. Do you believe that this system will substantially improve the claims process, and do you have any concerns with this planned rollout of the new system and all of the benefits that is touted therein?
So, having spent the last 2 years on the Benefit Modernization Advisory Committee, I feel confident in saying that this new system will completely change the way unemployment is handled here in Pennsylvania for the better. It's going to bring a lot of new technology to the forefront. It's going to have a lot of self-service options for claimants that we don't currently have. I think if we had a system like this now, people would be able to see a lot more information about their claims than they can right now, and they would not have as many questions as they do. So I think that this will really help us going forward. Moving off the mainframe is also vital. The mainframe is incredibly difficult to update. The department has done some great updates in the last few weeks that I didn't even think were possible to the mainframe to try to automate certain things that previously were not automated. But a lot of the back end pieces about our system that move really slowly are going to be gone. A lot of it's going to be faster. It's going to be more efficient. And you know, these 4-digit PIN numbers, they're going away, right? Like that, just like with PUA, it's going to be gone in the new system. So I think there's a lot to look forward to. My biggest concern, and I think it's been highlighted from PUA, is that we cannot move forward with this system without significant user testing. And I think it's going to be a challenge to figure out how to do that right now with everyone remote, with both employers, individual employers, and claimants or workers maybe not being able to go and step into a room to do testing with the department over the next few months. So I think we have to figure out how to do that. I think that's vital because I've spent the last 2 years, researching these systems across the country on a grant, and failure to do user testing has really stymied the implementation of these programs, and I think we need to make sure to do it.
I think we would have a very long list of volunteers for you.
I think we
immediately
would.
if we sent up that flare. Lastly, before I turn it over, it's about workforce development. So, Mr. Hackett, if you might chime in on this. We've heard from so many testifiers about what will the new normal be? What are we looking for? Things will change. Pennsylvania will change. Employment and manufacturing is going to have to change. Are you looking towards, or have you heard from, and are you communicating with people about workforce development, about how factories are going to have to change their systems for possibly social distancing or different sanitation or any of those items? I know in particular our hospitality industry is going to be forever changed moving forward. And that's a whole other issue that I'm not going to get into right now. But as far as workforce development, we had a hard time moving into this pandemic because we didn't have enough skilled workers in Pennsylvania to fill the positions we had. What is this looking like moving forward because of the issues that the pandemic has created?
Well, I think, Senator, you raise a terrific point, and the workforce of tomorrow is certainly going to be different than the workforce of today. And I think one of the things the President administration did very well was really pushing very hard on the apprenticeship programs and trying to use those as a vehicle to support family-sustaining jobs as well as the needs of industry, if you will. And so I think when credit is due, you should provide credit. And frankly, that I think is a model that serves all of us well. The days of mechanics and electricians are quickly being replaced by the days of technicians that have electromechanical skills. And I think we need to just continue to make sure there's good alignment between the primary education system, secondary education system, and business needs so that there is that pipeline of positions available when people are looking for work.
Thank you very much. Now, Senator Tartaglione, for your questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hackett, in your testimony, you specifically said that you are concerned about the food chain.
Yes.
You specifically mentioned meat processing plants.
I did not.
Food processing plants.
Yes.
I don't know how much experience you have in this area, but I can tell you that I do have some experience. Often in a food processing plant, you're working elbow to elbow. These are hot spots, and there's a high rate of infection. I want to say that I am very grateful to the governor for the executive order that he signed, mandating that they have PPE. They were working without PPE. They were working elbow to elbow, so there wasn't social distancing. There is now. There's a certain way that the place has to be cleaned. Before it wasn't. And the majority of these folks are making minimum wage. They didn't sign up for this kind of pay. So when you're saying they're not, you specifically said in this sector, people are not going back to work, there's continue to collect unemployment. For a $7.25 an hour job, you are taking your life into your hands. I want to thank the governor for that executive order. As well, in there finally is enforcement. Because I have lost a good friend who died from COVID-19 from being in a food processing plant in Montgomery County. So I just wanted to make that statement.
Sure. So, Senator, first of all, I'm sorry to hear of your loss, and there are so many tragic stories as a result of this pandemic, and I don't think any of us are taking it lightly. But I will tell you that, frankly, I sit on the board of this food processing organization, and I know the operation quite well. And I can also tell you emphatically, no one is making $7.25 an hour. And secondly, there are very specific cleaning protocols that have been in place a long time to ensure that the facility is clean, because that's an FDA requirement rather than OSHA or the CDC. So I understand what you're saying. I can assure you that this is not an elbow to elbow scenario that I'm describing, but I do want to put a point on one thing, and that is the specific reason that people were not returning to the jobs were they were making much more money, not because of safety. They were making much more money on unemployment compensation because of the supplemental $600 a week from the federal government that will run out at the end of July. And as instead of returning to an opportunity that frankly would be long lasting with benefits.
All I have to say, I have no other questions.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Baker, do you have questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank all of the testifiers, and I want to acknowledge Mr. Hackett, whom I've known for many years as a good steward and a good business owner. And I think I need to point out to those members of this committee that not only did you convert a line at your own facility to begin creating PPE and protective equipment for your staff and others, I think it just speaks to your focus on safety and best practices and the like. So I want to say that straight up. As you probably heard, my comments to the Secretary and to Senator Bartolotta's comments about how recovery happens, how do we move forward. Many states already have industry standard infrastructure advisory committees in place, and our WIB could have been that. Alex, are you aware of any effort by Pennsylvania to create those industry standard advisory committees that would be tasked with developing what this looks like moving forward, best practices, how can we reopen safely, and some of those types of things that many states have already done? The Secretary indicated a plan, but I'm not familiar with that. Are you aware of that plan, and are you involved and actively engaged in that plan?
Well, I cannot speak specifically to the plan that Secretary Alexiak referenced. I know that that there are private sector entities, the PA Chamber included, that is working with a broad cross-section of other associations, local chambers of commerce, and our employers to develop those types of guidance, certainly based on the requirements that are coming from both the federal and the state level. We're actually launched an initiative today bringing PA back, but specifically to the administration's plan, I cannot speak to any of the details on that.
Hackett, I don't know if you'd like to comment on that as well.
Well, I guess I share your view, Senator Baker, that engaging business in the process could provide much better ideas and directions, as well as others. I think organized labor has some really good insight into this situation. So I think that the more voices you can get, the more diverse opinions, the better the outcome can be. And I think when any of us make decisions in a vacuum, they tend not to be optimized.
I would agree, and I hope that as we do move forward and looking at best practices, the small business sector, large manufacturing, hospitals, all of those are part of that plan for how recovery happens and how we do move forward. Thank you both for being with us today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Baker. We have 3 more questions, and I'm asking that we wrap it up as quickly as possible. In the interest of time, we're working on 4 o'clock at the moment, so please make your one question and a short answer. If you could possibly do that, I'd greatly appreciate it. Senator Williams, your question.
I'd like to follow up on my colleague Senator Carney's question. What I've been seeing is a growing trend of workers who are afraid to go back to work because they don't have the PPE. Now, I've talked to a number of my small businesses. Some of them are preparing to reopen, and they've been able to make modifications and obtain PPE. Others are having a lot of challenges with that. And I appreciate, the the good employers that are out there trying to do what they can to protect their employers. Unfortunately, we do have the ones who aren't doing that. And those are the ones that are calling my office, virtually in tears. And in the perfect world, they would be able to raise their hand and say, this is a health and safety issue. Can you please fix this? Can you please give me the equipment I need? And as Miss Simon Michelle pointed out, raising these issues, putting it in writing, that's recommended. But we also have to remember that the OSHA whistleblower protections are very inadequate. I used to work at the National Whistleblower Center. I worked there for 4 years. It's one of the most outdated whistleblower protections for employees who do raise those issues and are ignored or retaliated against. So I do have fear for those workers that speak up. And you both talked about, Mr. Halper and Mr. Hackett, you talked about wanting to make sure that people have a safe workplace to return to. So my question is, do you support extending OSHA protections here in the Commonwealth? Because those OSHA guidelines are just that. They're guidelines. Do you support extending the number of workers that are covered under OSHA here and putting some enforcement teeth on those guidelines so that when workers raise health and safety issues, they are protected?
Well, Senator, we would absolutely be part of a discussion on how to ensure workplace protections and a safe workplace for employers and employees. We are looking at guidance that is coming from both the federal level through OSHA and CDC, as well as at the state level with the Department of Health. Already seeing some areas of inconsistency, and I do believe that a deliberative, focused strategy to ensure that there is a clear set of rules for employers will be extremely helpful to helping encourage compliance. But without a doubt, and employers recognize that in order for their businesses to operate, a safe workplace is essential. So that has got to be, we certainly believe, PA chamber members, I know that has been a priority forever, but obviously, there are bad apples in any community, and public policy has to account for that.
I understand that, and I appreciate that. I look forward to talking to you about some actual enforceable requirements for employers.
If I could just comment,
Yep.
Senator, I think what Alex said is exactly right. And I think that there are some bad apples here and there, but I think that good employers recognize that keeping their employees safe is not only good for the employees, it's good business. And frankly, I think that's the way most of us approach it. I think you can always find those horror stories of employers that aren't doing what they should be doing. But I can speak for a lot of guys I know that, we really put the safety of our teams first and foremost because we know how important they are to the business.
I agree. I agree that it's in all of our best interest.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the question. We have two more. Senator Pat Stefano.
Thank you. I know we're running very short on time, and I'll just be very brief with a question for Ms. Simon Michelle. I know unemployment compensation is meant to be temporary as you go from one job bridge to another. And I know in this situation, this is forced temporary, and it's been temporary longer than we would all like. And we were talking about some of these businesses that actually got a chance to open, and we're having some issues. We discussed it, of those workers going back that don't go back because of different fears that they have. And I believe in communication, and communication's been lacking all the way through, up and down this whole crisis. So there has to be communication. But this program is funded through people working. That's how it's funded, through payroll taxes, employer, employee. When something like this happens, I'd love from your perspective, how would we fund a program like this when we can't get people to go back to work?
So we're talking here about the trust fund, and as you heard, our trust fund solvency is in a good position right now. And so really, what we're looking is long term, right? We're not looking at a short term issue right now. And actually, Right now, there's waivers in place for charges against employers for people who collect, so there will be no tax increases on those employers as a result of this crisis based on the governor's actions. So I think we're looking at a change in what work represents and looks like here in the Commonwealth when we're living with this pandemic for we only know how long. I think, as was mentioned earlier, a lot of our business people are innovative, and I think they're going to figure out ways to bring back people safely. I'll note that right now, in Pennsylvania, we have 26 weeks of benefits, and the federal government has extended it another 13 weeks, right? And again, those extensions come out of the federal government's pocket, not out of the state trust fund's pocket. Similarly, with the $600 extra per week, that's coming out of the federal government's pocket. So I don't think that we are in danger of not being able to fund our own trust fund and how it's going to affect the program going forward.
Thank you for your perspective.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Iovino.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is for Mr. Halper from the Chamber. I'm so glad you're here today. Your focus, appropriately so, is on business, the economy, the success of your members. I also assume, though, that you're a reasoned person and you care about the public health of Pennsylvanians and appreciate the reality of operating in the context of a global pandemic. However, completely understandably, your focus is on the business of the businesses that you represent. So those of us here in this virtual dais, we don't have quite that same latitude of giving one set of priorities precedence over another. The economy over public health, or the public safety over the economy. We took an oath, and we have to find and strike that balance between the public health and the economy. So we rely on data to help inform us to do that. So I'm gonna, according to some recent polling by Harper Polling, and I think it's relevant to mention that Harper Polling was started just a few years ago by the former director of polling for the NRCC, for the National Republican Congressional Committee. And in that polling, it said 74% of Pennsylvania.
I'm sorry, Senator, we're really long on time. Could you please ask your question? I apologize. We need to get straight to the question. Thank you.
Certainly. Could the slide that has been queued up for me be put up on the screen at this point? So 77% of Pennsylvanians say that they will not immediately return to normal economic behavior, such as eating out and participating in large gatherings. As you see from the slide, the further breakdown is that 53% say they won't feel comfortable in doing that until there's been some time has passed. 21%, that's more than 1 in 5, say not until there's a vaccine deployed. And 3% say they can't get back to some sort of normal economic commerce and behavior. So it tells us a couple things, that there was support of the closing, the unfortunate but the necessary closing of business, and then we now have trepidation by our consumers about the pandemic. So based on this data, I posed this question to Gene Barr, your CEO, when he was before different committees last week. And that is to protect your businesses, your members, to help the economy of Pennsylvania, to use every means possible to stimulate our economy post this pandemic and this mass business closure situation that we're in. Would the Chamber support the legislation that I've introduced, which I'm pleased to say is bipartisan? I'm not surprised in the least that it's bipartisan. It's business interruption insurance that I suspect there isn't a member of this chamber, all of my colleagues, that don't have constituents who have been impacted by this and would like to benefit from that insurance. So I would ask that, so my question to you is, will the chamber work in helping with passage of this and support this for their members?
Thank you for the question, Senator. And naturally, I would defer to the response of my boss, Gene Barr, when you and he had that discussion, I guess, a couple weeks ago. There are a number of important factors to consider. We do know at the national level there are discussions occurring on how employers in these situations can be assisted. We also know that in order for the economy to rebound and for businesses to be able to exist and thrive going forward, there will of course need to be a robust and healthy insurance market. So, both of these factors have to be considered when we look at how to assist employers whose livelihoods have been put on hold, who've not been able to sell their goods, service their customers. So it's a dual track that can hopefully work together. But we would be happy to participate in any discussion occurring among legislators on these important topics. But I do appreciate the question.
Thank you, Mr. Helper.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that because it wouldn't, we need not, this is something that the state can do on its own. We need not, wait for a national discussion to be continued or to complete to do that. So
Thank you so much
Madam
for your
Chair.
question. Thank you very much for your question, Senator, and thank you very much to all of our panelists. We really appreciate all of your participation in this lengthy hearing. It's an extremely important hearing. The topic is absolutely first and foremost on the minds of every legislator, on the top of the minds of every single individual, now moving close to a 2 million mark for those individuals who are seeking unemployment compensation and guidance and are looking to us for that guidance and help. So I'm hoping that some of this information is helpful to those that have been watching. I hope that we move forward to really bolster the unemployment compensation system that is in such dire need of revamping, and hopefully the message is accurate, that we will look for a much more capable system opening in October of this year. And I certainly hope that we don't need a robust unemployment compensation system to handle another tsunami of any unemployment compensation claims. Our hope, our wish, is to keep Pennsylvanians safe while also protecting our economy and our wonderful business owners who have sacrificed everything for the American dream that seems to be a nightmare these days. And we know that protecting lives and livelihoods are not impossible to achieve at the same time. And I appreciate everyone's time today. Thank you so very, very much for what you're doing. We appreciate the secretary that was here earlier, the other secretaries. We know they're doing an incredible job under these circumstances. And I wish all of you well, and I thank you for participating today. Thank you.